Evening and welcome to the Wednesday, September 8th, 2021 meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety due to the COVID-19 virus and to comply with issues ordered by the governor, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and or the Washtenaw County Health Department. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. To speak during the public comment opportunities, you'll be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone, depending on your method. And the web link are available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and then enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. This information is also available on the published agenda. It's in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at a2gov.org/watchctn, where you would select the government channel. Item 2 on the agenda is the roll call. Mr. Leonard, will you please assist with that?
Of course. Commissioner Mills.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Dish.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Also here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Clark. I see Commissioner Clark, but I don't hear, so we'll follow up. Commissioner White.
Here.
There we go. Full commission and quorum.
Very good. Okay, item 3 is introductions, and are there any? Great.
No.
Then we'll move on to item 4. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Lee. Is there any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand or say aye. Aye, that is all hands, and I'll see Commissioner Clark in a minute. There's her hand. Great. Next is the minutes of the previous meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August 17th, 2021 meeting? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Abrams. Any discussion or corrections in the minutes? All right then, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise a hand. That's all the hands. All right, so the motion carries. Item 6 are all of the reports from city administration, city council, and so on. Councilmember Dish, do you have a report from last night?
Yes, we passed the lighting ordinance on the second reading, and we had the second reading of home occupations, and that also passed. And we had a demonstration of how hard it is to read a site plan at a council meeting. But that was related to none of those ordinances.
Mr. Leonard, do you have anything to add in?
Sure. I would also add in that the revised bylaws of the Planning Commission were also adopted. I think that was everything. And then for just a preview for the working session next week, we have invited the petitioner of 2060 West Stadium to come and present an alternative concept. You recall this petition came with a lot of discussion about a drive-through, and so in consultation with the petitioner, they have developed a sort of an alternative concept, and we're going to bring that back for any sort of feedback that you can provide before that is either refined or not. So, and that's all.
Very good. So this means that this will be the last agenda that we have with introductions.
It will.
Okay, excellent. That was among the changes that was in our bylaws. Are there any other commissioner officers or committee liaisons that want to report out what happened in your other committees? It feels like it was eons ago, but I'll report out on the ORC. We did meet on, when was it? The 24th, I think. Yes, Tuesday the 24th, and talked about TC1 rezoning, some additional conversation, update on kind of where that stands. Parking, we talked a lot about parking regulations and what we might see, want to see in that, and how it links to our existing documents within the comprehensive land use plans. We also talked about potential ordinance change to simplify the fences. So regulations related to fences. All right. Nothing else to report. Okay, then we are on to item 7, which is public comment. This is the first of 2 opportunities for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about general topics. This is not a time to speak about an item that is listed as a public hearing on this agenda. So please note that the Planning Commission will hold dedicated public hearings for the site plan review thresholds discussion and 660 Earhart. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on any other matters, now is the appropriate time to raise your hand and indicate so. To speak, if you've dialed in, press *9 on your phone to use the raise hand feature. And you can use the raise hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. For phone access, you can dial 877-853-5247 and then enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number if you dialed in, or by your name if you've joined through the web link. And when you're speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background sounds so that we can hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller with the phone number ending with 534. Caller with the phone number ending with 534. You can press *6 to unmute your phone and address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is Tom Stolberg calling from Lowertown. Some of you have heard me talk about being a developer of subdivisions in the past, and perhaps some of you have not. So I'll briefly review that. That is one of the hats that I've worn in Oakland County, in many communities throughout Oakland County. I developed subdivisions, including getting rezonings and working with city councils, township boards, planning commissions, planners, including in West Bloomfield, where there was a very strict wetlands and woodlands ordinances. Our company received not 1 but 2 awards for being an environmentally sensitive developer in that area. And one of the things I learned a lot about there was what stormwater does to sensitive environmental features. And that was when we had a lot less stormwater than we have now. So I'd like to talk about stormwater, which is something I'm going to talk about in the near future on repeated occasions, because I think it is a crisis that's already here and that we need to deal with it, and that there are ways that we can deal with it. One of them is in our ordinances, such as TC1, to do something similar to what was done in the repealing and replacing of the plan project modification, and that would be to incentivize through bonuses additional stormwater management measures, such as similar that we did to affordable housing or sustainability measures in the what repealed and replaced plan project modifications. I know that's not, there was a call from City Council that was voted down 7-4 about adding in such things to TC1, but I think you should still consider it. And why? You know, I've seen what a mere small amount of extra stormwater can do to a wooded wetland. What it does is it turns it to a dead swamp, and that's a small amount. We have a large built infrastructure that was built to the standards of its day. Our standards are pretty good right now, but our standards now are insufficient to make up for our built infrastructure. How are we going to make up for what's already built that we can't change easily? When we have new development, particularly redevelopment, particularly in TC1, if we have additional stormwater management features that are above and beyond what we can require legally of the developer by incentivizing them,
30 more
through
seconds.
premiums, options, bonuses, whatever you want to call them, by incentivizing enhanced stormwater management above and beyond what is required, is about one of our only ways that we can make up for the already built environment that is inadequate for today's stormwater and inadequate for what we can really anticipate is going to be increased frequency, duration, and severity of stormwater events that we're already seeing coming, and it's going to be even worse in the very near future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to speak at this public comment opportunity about an item that's not listed for a public hearing, you can press *9 if you've dialed in, or if you're joining via the web link, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. All right, seeing none, let's move on to item 8, which is the public hearings for the next business meeting. Mr. Leonard?
Yes, we have one new public hearing scheduled for the next business meeting. It is for 1300 South Maple Road, Grace Bible Church site plan for city council approval. This is a proposed 34,045 square feet addition to the building and parking lot expansion of 107 spaces on a 15.5 acre site. Site improvements will include new landscape plantings, new stormwater infrastructure for building expansion, and new parking lot and bioretention swales.
All right, very good. First up is item 9A, unfinished business. So this is the proposed amendments to section 5.29.6 site plan specific standards in our Unified Development Code. I see you're promoting Mr. Kowalski to provide the staff presentation, and then just a reminder of the order of operations. Mr. Kowalski will provide that presentation, and then we'll open up the public hearing before we discuss.
If I could, before Mr. Kowalski started, my apologies to the public. I'm
sorry. There's a lot of echo, Matt.
Matt, can you try muting yourself to see if it's you? It's you. You're the problem. So see if you can fix that with your IT staff. So first of all, I wanted to apologize to the commission and to the public. I want to be clear, we are recommending postponement of this item. And I want to give you just a quick background. The short of it is that we made an error, and I want to fix it before I am confident making a recommendation that you adopt it. We're gonna provide a bit of an overview of that as we go through the presentation. To be clear, we're not recommending changes to the thresholds that we've already discussed at this time. But what we've learned is that I think that there are some unintended consequences from our error, specifically as it relates to stormwater standards being applied to these projects. So Matt's going to go over some of the changes that were made based on the previous discussion. I am going to then sort of bookend that with an overview of specifically how these stormwater standards relate to these changes, and tee up some feedback that we're hoping to get from the commission before we bring it back in its final format. With that, let's give it a try, Matt. Maybe you'll be a little less echoey.
Okay, turn my volume down a little bit. I hope it's not too echoey yet, but okay, we'll see. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm attempt the good old share screen here. Hopefully that works. We are looking at the PowerPoint. So perfect. Okay. All right. Okay. So basically, again, as Brett had said, I'm kind of going to go over what we have changed in the table as a direct response to the comments at the last Planning Commission meeting. So I will be showing when my screen advances here. There we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm kind of read through them in order as they were posted on your staff report as well. So we did have some questions about trying to clarify some of, in particular, like what exactly is a site plan not required, you know, the exempt thing. So what we have added onto that is a footnote that you can see where it says site plan not required. There's a one as we go through, and I'm just going to scroll quickly to the last page. You can see that with a little bit of an explanation stating no site plan required. However, this does not exempt the action from any required permits and corresponding code requirements. So that, again, that was a concern. Hopefully that helps address that issue. And if not, again, we can make further changes to that as well. I make a slight change to where you see in blue here where it says work/modifications on existing buildings. Just, again, it was something that we went through as staff to kind of make it clear that anything that is going on within that building is going to fall into that category. The next change you see down there in blue says area of the building. That was, again, a comment directly from Planning Commission. We also heard from some of our advisory committee members that, you know, what the 10%, you know, is that of all buildings on site, or is that of one particular building? So we've always treated it as of one building. So we've basically added that text into there to, you know, to make it clear. And again, right directly below that, you see kind of the same change that has of the building added as well. Interior construction, we did cover that last time. That was still highlighted in blue. However, that was a change that we did highlight for you guys last time. A little bit further on it, and this, oops, sorry, this was one that we had that had been left out. That was caught, I believe, by Commissioner Mills. That wireless communications tower was not specifically called out in there, although it could have lumped it under a building structure kind of thing. But calling that out separately, we don't see a lot of them. But again, we'll put that in as kind of a separate category there, just to make sure that we are covered in that. Scrolling along to the next page, we have another footnote that's added. If you go near the top to that, the footnote 2, that was, again, this is accessory structures and canopies and things like carports. When we go to the last page here with the footnote, it does note that the section number for the solar energy systems, if you all remember that we did, those are accessory structures, but we've kind of got a special category for them, which allows them to exceed that, that requirement and without site planning, as long as it falls within those certain standards of that section that we have listed there. The next, one of the ones, the one highlighted in yellow, again, that was a planning commission. This is kind of our follow-up discussion we'll have after this regarding the stormwater. Planning commission last time kind of felt it should be a little bit larger, but now again, with the correction to our stormwater, we want to make sure that we're clear on what would happen with that one. So that's why that's highlighted. There is no change to that per se, but that was what was highlighted there. Next change down, removal disturbance of any regulated natural features. Again, that could have been covered in other areas, but we really wanted to make it clear that, again, landmark trees or anything else disturbing or wetland, that triggers a site plan. Now, whether it may be a planning manager for certain projects and then mixed use and larger residential projects, that would require planning commission approval, same as today. And one removal. So the last kind of change on this is you can see a strikeout, removal of a tree identified as a landmark tree to be saved, but then so the plan comes back in and it's now recognized as an invasive. That I'm not really sure why that was even in there. I've never had that come. It probably was a direct response of one project, but if it's an invasive tree, you don't have to mitigate it for it. So it's kind of redundant. So we really don't need for that. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times we want the invasive trees removed. So, and that really, so that covers, again, kind of the highlights to the table. I'm going to stop sharing it this time and then kind of have Brett wrap up a little bit more. I can bring up the table and we can certainly answer any questions as we get through.
All right, can everybody see a table, sort of a very boring looking white table?
We can.
So I just want to go through, this is how I've been thinking about the omission in our thinking about this. And so I'm gonna probably spend a little bit more time on how stormwater is regulated. Some of you, this is, you know much more about this than I do. I think for others, it might be helpful context. So I'm going to start with this table, which is, this is how we regulate stormwater currently. if you are a 1 or 2 family residential use in a residentially zoned property, and you are adding less than 200 square feet of impervious surface, regardless of what is happening on your property now, no stormwater is required. So based on that land use and a very small addition of impervious surface, there's no stormwater obligations to be incorporated onto your site or property for that purpose. That does mean over time that you could add small bits of impervious surface over time, increasing that on an incremental basis without changing site-wide how stormwater is being managed. Apart from that, when you exceed that improvement, or you're talking about an overall site improvement of a 1 and 2 family that has a larger impervious area, we provide a worksheet, and the worksheet is a calculus that both the petitioner and the city review that's generally calculates the impervious areas on the site, including all buildings, walks, drives, assigns a volume to that, and requires detention of that, which is I'm generally going to call here first flush. And that's roughly about an inch of rain over those surfaces. And first flush is very much intended to define that initial shot of stormwater into that system does have the effect of sort of flushing out the infrastructure, whether it's downspouts or drainage pipes or the like, to for that occurrence. That exercise applies to 1 and 2 family, regardless of the impervious area that the site covers. So whether it is up to 5,000 square feet of impervious, or it is 20,000 square feet of impervious, that same exercise happens. Now, to be clear, that exercise results in different volumes that have to be addressed. Some of the common ways that that's addressed with residential properties might be rain gardens, it might be swales, it might be rain barrels, it might be dry wells. So those are a lot of ways that can be accomplished, but the standard, the goal sought to be achieved is the same for that category of land use, regardless of its size. Then when you shift into multiple family residential and non-residential, alternatively, think about these as those developments that require site plan review. That 200 square foot no longer applies. That's a unique provision that is applying to the 1 and 2 family residential. Up to 5,000 square feet of those site plan projects, no stormwater is required. So that is a current feature and requirement of our ordinance for site plan projects that have a small area, again defined as up to 5,000 square feet of impervious area. There are no specific standards that we are measuring that site to for stormwater treatment and management. As you progress through the size of impervious areas, more requirements are added to those sites. You can see here, they're the same in both of those categories. Again, think about it from all those developments that require site plan review. When you are 5,000 to 10,000 square feet of impervious area, then you have to retain or infiltrate the first flush storm event. So that's a very similar exercise to what you're seeing across the board for 1 and 2 family residential. Once you go into a larger category of impervious area from 10,000 to 14,999, I hope I got the ones and the 99s correct, but generally that range, we add requirements. Not only do you have to detain for that first flush, but you also have to detain for something called bank full storm events. And this is where somebody's probably going to correct me if I misstate it, but this is another calculation of stormwater volume from that site as it relates to what volume would be generated when the corresponding bank of a creek or tributary or river is being impacted by a storm event. And so the sort of relative volume that's happening at this site relative to that creek being at its full capacity without overflow, that's the calculation here then that needs to be detained on the site as well. When you progress into the larger areas, larger sites with by larger areas of impervious surface greater than 15,000 square feet, you have to design your system to meet those standards. You also have to design your site to detain a 100-year storm event. So again, these storm events are starting to increase in intensity and volume as we progress through these requirements. With these larger sites, you have to detain that. That's where a lot of times when sites are coming to us, if they're unable to infiltrate, the rules require you actually detain that 100-year storm event volume at 120% rather than 100% if you are unable to infiltrate. And we also require a design feature of a sediment forebay or a mechanism to really attempt to improve the water quality in those larger systems as part of that strategy. First flush has some benefit of water quality regardless. This is obviously applying another water quality condition to larger systems on larger sites. So the mistake, my apologies, that because of this structure, the way this is constructed in our ordinances, it is quite specific. 1 and 2 family is regulated in this way. Everything that goes through site plan review is regulated in this way. And so when we start looking at making some modifications to that framework, that's where this comes into play. And so we've added a couple of examples. For example, if we now add 3 and 4 residential as exempt from site plan review, right now, barring any changes to those stormwater requirements, that has no stormwater regulations. That's not my intent. I don't think it's the Planning Commission's intention to do that. Nonetheless, one of the things we need to decide then is, does that feel more appropriate to follow that 1-2 family residential first flush? Or is it something that we want to pursue that graduated approach to a more intense, robust, and expensive system as those impervious surfaces increase? It's not to say that we can definitely do the first flush, obviously absent a site plan. I would say as we start talking about the other tools and the other measures, even if we're doing it outside of a site plan, it's still going to start leaning towards a pretty robust and comprehensive assembly of information design standards for review. It's going to start feeling quite a lot like a site plan in some ways. So similarly, when we're talking about a 300 square foot addition or patios up to 1,000 square feet, that same standard is going to come into play. That is, absent a site plan for kicking in those last 3 columns particularly, when we pull those out of site plan right now, absent any changes to those stormwater regulations, there is no requirement for stormwater management on those sites. Again, the city has a lot of goals towards stormwater management, and that's part of the balance, of course, with smaller projects and the costs that we're adding to them. At the same time, I wrote it down to make sure I have it right. About 15% of the land area in the city is covered by detention. So 15% of the land in the city has detention. That means 85% was constructed without detention typically prior to the requirements and design standards that we have in place now. So whether it's a single family home with a rain barrel or a larger site, the opportunity when these things are improved or reviewed to make incremental or large changes can have a pretty significant impact on the city's stormwater goals. So, as part of the discussion, again, I still feel a confidence about that we've these identified correctly. We need to fix this aspect, and the feedback that I would value is, does it feel more like finding the methods for this graduated stormwater approach, applying to those in a perhaps efficient building permit method? Or is there more comfort in saying a first flush is still a benefit, recognizing that we have to adjust our thinking about 1 and 2 family down to up to 4 family, or down to up to 4 family with 1,000 foot patio, or something in between, so that we can then come back to you with probably those corresponding changes in the stormwater regulations that match with our site plan review thresholds, so we're not creating these gaps. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, my apologies to those that know this a lot better than I do, but this is something that we'd value some feedback on, and I'd like to come to you with a more complete response and solution to these gaps prior to that.
Very good, thank you. Before we dive into giving some feedback on that, we will have the public hearing. So this is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed site plan specific standard amendments. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on this item, please press *9 if you're listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if you're viewing this through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and then enter our meeting ID, which is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on those who have raised their hand, calling on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number or by your name if you've joined us through Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or other background sounds so that we can hear you more clearly. And please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. If anyone on the line or who has joined through the web link wishes to address us, it's *9 to raise your hand on the phone, or the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
Not seeing any indication.
All right, well, then I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code to amend sections 5.29.6 related to site plan review and approval standards. Moved by Commissioner Hammerschmidt, seconded by Commissioner Dish. Is there any discussion? Commissioner DeBrandel, thank you.
First of all, Mr. Leonard, you did an excellent job of describing everything. So even though you criticized yourself several times, I think you did a really great job of outlining all of that. It would be helpful for me, actually, if you brought up that sheet again that had the yellow highlights on it. So one question I have with the 3 to 4 family residential, how are we handling parking with these in terms of, I'm just trying to get a handle on like the amount of impervious surface that we really may be dealing with. And I don't recall that off the top of my head, how we're not requiring a whole separate parking lot, correct? Or am I wrong about that?
So generally, it's just going to be based on the parking requirements, which I'm thinking, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking the majority of these are probably R4C, which are 1.5 spaces per unit. So, this is going to be, it's probably akin to the recent developments we saw on, I want to say that there were a couple on Hill recently. A lot of probably 3 and 4 units, 6-bedroom, student focused apartments with 5 to 6 space parking lots. It's a good question. I don't know. I didn't go to those and sort of start categorizing some example projects about which of these they fall into, which is maybe unfair to ask for you to then categorize it. That's something we could certainly follow up with or bring to you a recommendation based on some of that data. But if you could at least point us in the direction, it'd be helpful.
Yeah, no, that helps, because if we are definitely requiring, 1.5 per unit, then you're going to have a parking lot there. I mean, I guess that's part of what, is it going to have all the same dimensional standards and everything like that we require of our parking lots, which, Like it's not what you see in, Burns Park, where the old house is rented out their place for years and they have a bunch of parking in the back. Those things don't meet our current standards at all, in terms of like islands and spacing and all that kind of thing. So having some sense of the kind of the order of magnitude of impact, I think would be really helpful. I think that it starts getting really pricey when, because I know part of this is around that, right? We're trying to like densify and make this more like viable. First flush is probably the most important out there in terms of what we've got going on. I would point out that first flush according to the county is different than first flush according to your residential stormwater code. And so it might be like, and so first flush for the county is more in the 2-inch range now, I think. I believe you should double check on that, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of how they were last categorizing it. And doing a first flush 2-inch storm covers a lot of storms, like a whole lot of storms. It covers, I think, over 84% or something like that. It's a lot. So it's not going to address the big flooding issues that we have. It will address the water quality issues that we have. And water quality is a big, big, big part of it. It really is. And the thing that there's one little correction I would make in the way that you're talking about things is that, and this is getting technical, but there's a difference between what they call detention and retention. And detention is when you have the water in a pond and you see that pipe and it's being let out at what they call a pre-development rate. It's like a little tiny hole and the water's coming out slowly. Retention is what we are like a rain garden is, where it fills up and then it infiltrates into the ground. And so these 1 and 2 family residential ones, those are all retention. They have no way of, like they just go down or they spill up and over, but it's not like let out at this predetermined rate. So if we have the 3 and 4 family residential do a kind of 2-inch storm, but have it be basically rain garden style, that is not prohibitively expensive. What gets way, way expensive is and it depends on how much space you have, obviously, but what gets way, way expensive is, having the big standpipe or having the whole underground system. I mean, that's crazy expensive, but a lot of that is based more on like the huge amount of volume that you need for these things. So I would recommend, first of all, just getting a sense of sort of how much we're dealing with in terms of the impervious area for these 3 and 4 family, like what that really shakes out to be, and considering doing essentially a little bit more robust, like 2-inch first flush, but double check on that one for me in terms of the county rain garden style. And that if the soils are really poor, that it can be a similar kind of thing to the like 20% more business that we have for the 100-year, where we have really poor soils. The thing that's also gets really expensive is the soil testing that is required by the county as well. So if it can be something that is checked by your very capable stormwater manager, Peter Stevens, to go out and dig the hole and check out the soils that you see. You can even do a pretty like straightforward perk test kind of thing to see, like, does it stick around for 24 hours? Does it stick around for 2 hours? Something like that. You can get a really good idea of how things are going to behave. So I feel like that I want to control something here. I don't want it to just slip through the system. But I feel like there's a way to still hold them to a standard that's going to make a big difference, but it is not as crazy robust as our county system, which is like a complete leader in the field. I mean, really like way, way above what like any county in the state does. I mean, truly, they are like leading the way in all kinds of things here, but it's also really expensive to go through that whole process. So I would say 2-inch rain garden style with some sense of checking what the soils are to see if you really have any capacity. the 20% thing I could be talked down from. One of the things that I think that would make a big difference is if it's actually a planted rain garden. The plants actually do a lot of work over time and can open up those soils. It may be that we have kind of a more standard detail about how we want to handle soils and plants in that situation, which we don't really have right now. And so if we have some guidance for some of these smaller systems about how to do it, then we can have kind of more of a standard of, yeah, you need plants planted every 18 inches and you need to do this to the soils. And you know what I mean? Something that's going to sort of guarantee you a little bit more quality when it comes out of it. So like when the 1 or 2 family residential, it's like usually those people are kind of into it and it's their own place and all that kind of thing. You don't really know, you know, with the 3 or 4 families, sort of how that's going to play out with that. So that's my feedback on the 3 to 4 family one. And the 300 square foot addition, I think that you could easily handle that with the way that you handle the 1 and 2 family residential one. It's just like a little bit more impervious surface. I think the thing that's important is that because you may be adding something on in a funny way, and you can't capture the water right there, wherever your addition is going, that it's as long as you can get water there from a different part of the site that's from an impervious area that is 300 square feet, it counts. So you may put the addition on the south side of the site, but you direct some of the roof water from the north side of the site to your new rain garden area. That works okay too. It's just more like you just want to make sure you're capturing that. With the patios, I kind of see that as it's not going to be the same level as the 3 to 4 family residential in terms of the size. It's you know, a little bit bigger, and I think that, in my opinion, that could be handled kind of like the either the 1 or 2 family or the 3 to 4 family, like some with the rain garden style. A little bit, not nearly as kind of like super high level of regulatory, you know, performance and compliance with that, but that still makes a big difference, you know, with things. So I think that could still fall in that category and work well. And we still get a lot of bang for our buck with this approach without it costing. It would just be a huge thing to put those people through what the county standards are. I mean, it really is incredibly rigorous. So that's my, I guess, more than 2 cents on this one.
Mr. Leonard.
Could I ask a couple of questions of our resident expert?
Sure.
So you mentioned the county first flush versus the city. Would it, as we look into this, would it make sense to sort of point to the county's first flush standard? Or are you saying sort of just sort of set a 2-inch standard?
I would, first of all, corroborate that one.
Yeah.
I would set a 2-inch standard. There, I mean, you'd be having people wade through like a huge document to get to that, and it'd be completely overwhelming. And
Okay.
so I think it'd be better just to kind of take the point that you want and then go from there. And again, I feel like I could be talked into like an inch for all of these, and it would probably still be fine, because what I have seen over time is that even if they fall apart in terms of their weediness and they don't look very good, they work better over time. The plants just do an incredible job of sucking up the water and opening up the soils. And so what doesn't necessarily work over time are the underground basins that just have the soils to rely on if it's not sandy. And so that's another kind of nuance that might be interesting to tease apart, is that if it's an underground system, that maybe you have it capture more than a rain garden, because the rain garden performs better over time and the one underground really does not. It just is purely volume oriented. So that may be another nuance that that might get people to do the more surface application that is actually better in the long run anyway, in terms of how it's managed over time.
And then with applying sort of a similar approach to, say, a patio being added on to a restaurant. In that case, you might have a circumstance where the bulk of the site is actually managed through a system that might fall into one of those more robust categories. And I just want to be clear, that might be, if you don't have capacity there, then we go to this sort of 2-inch model. Alternatively, maybe we provide the option to say, if you if you can demonstrate that for some reason it's over capacity, it seems unlikely, then that could be accommodated.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a site plan, then they've already done the calculations and they can, I mean, a lot of people build in some slop because you just don't know how, you know, like if someone's going to add something or whatever, and it's a little bit over and you can fit it in. But there's plenty of places that just never went through site plan, you know, that are going to fall under this. And they can still, like, you can still store it kind of underneath the patio itself, as long as you have soils that are going to work. And there's other just creative ways of being able to handle that for sure. So you don't necessarily have to have lots of land, you know, to be able to do this. You can handle it in other ways, but it's really, really soil dependent, basically. That's what it comes down to.
Any other questions or feedback? I'm not sure that I'm understanding the 300 square foot addition in the patios. And maybe this is also the way that the total impervious area of the project site is calculated. So that only refers to what you're disturbing in your site plan. Like if you're doing a change, you don't then go back and say how much imperviousness is there on the site overall.
Yeah, so that's what's a little confusing about it. So when you are disturbing a small portion of the site, actually all of those columns only apply to the area being disturbed if it is less than, I think, 50% of the site. If it's over that, for example, for some reason that 1,000 square foot patio involved that, then you are looking at the whole site. But even if you're only looking at that portion of a site, my sense is that a way to open this up towards the city council's goal would be just that. How do we decouple it from the system, regardless of 50%? Well, it's probably always going to be under 50% 1,000 square foot patio. To what extent are we comfortable decoupling? We want the whole site managed by one stormwater system versus we want the site managed by a stormwater system, but now we're going to take a component of it and do that through a different management practice. And so that's kind of what I was trying to get to with the question, I think, but your point's a good one. If you're adding 1,000 square foot patio, it's not going to bring that into the entire site. But now by going through site plan, we're still looking at those quantities. If there's no stormwater system there, we might be doing some water quality improvements as part of that first flush. In a way, the question is, do we even want to look at that, or do we want to provide, if you can find some way to do a rain garden on the site to accommodate this 1,000 square foot patio, we won't even look at that system.
Got it. Well, and the other question is and again, make sure that I'm reading this right. In multifamily residential and non-family residential, currently, if they're adding a patio, an outdoor patio of 1,000 square feet, according to this table, I'm reading it as that they don't need to worry about stormwater because it would be under 5,000 square feet. Is that fair? If that's the only thing that they're doing?
It depends on the extent that they end up disturbing of that site as part of that. So if they're doing it as part of like I'm trying to think, like a large fraternity house, like it's possible that the size of that patio could get to a point where it starts creeping into that 50% of impervious of the site. So
got it.
But your question's a good one, that it automatically goes to site plan now. So it's getting looked at from that lens. I think that's something, but I take your points. I think that's something that I don't know if we need to clarify in this table, but certainly in what we're bringing back about. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get a comfort level on. I think I'm hearing comfort in, it's not that all the stormwater has to be accomplished through the same method. All the stormwater has to be managed.
And I would just say, I don't know what the stormwater side looks like in terms of the table, but if it can be clearer, this is what you're doing, and this is especially if we're adding different categories of stormwater management or different levels of requirements for stormwater management, like hopefully moving to a system where it's easier to look up.
I agree. That's why I created this, because I couldn't find that. I was trying to get my head wrapped around it.
Okay. So, and I defer to Commissioner Gibrandel on all things like what is appropriate and right priced and environmentally like responsible. So, yeah. Commissioner Dish.
Thank you. This is very illuminating. And I just wanted to make sure that I am completely following, that it sounds to me like there are two issues. There's the issue that we just walked through with Commissioner Gibrandel largely, which is what would be the appropriate level and the preferred ways of treating stormwater on these smaller projects that we don't actually want to exempt from stormwater management, but we do want to exempt from site plan review. And then the other issue is, where do we put the thing that, what mechanism do we do to regulate their storm water if it's not going to be a site plan? And so, okay, so good, I'm following so far. And then what I also understood you to say, Mr. Leonard, was that, well, so wait, let me back up. So has the technical discussion that we've had with Commissioner Gibrandel, who said that a rain garden that can retain 2 inches of stormwater would be a fine and dandy thing for multifamily residential, as well as for patios over 300 feet. Does that alleviate your concern, Mr. Leonard? Because you were saying that you worried that as we get up into those more complex stormwater management systems, we're going to need something that looks a lot like a site plan in order to design those. And has Commissioner Gibrandel just alleviated that concern, or did we not reach the more larger and more complex systems?
I think it's from my lens, it's helpful that that's what Commissioner Gibrandel indicated is kind of the feedback I was looking for. For example, under the scenario, if you got to a 12,000 of square foot of impervious area of a 4-unit apartment, which I think you could very well get to. Do we want to provide a more simplified approach where, akin to our 1 and 2 family, you as the property owner actually fill out a worksheet and you say, this is how big the area of my driveway, my building, my sidewalks, you add it all up. We tell you what to multiply it by to get to a volume. And then you go to the next part of that checklist that says, this is how I'm going to address that. I'm going to provide a rain garden here, which is going to give me this credit. I'm going to do a rain barrel here, which is going to give me this credit. And there's a brief menu of actually choices that you can get to that volume for. And if that works out, check, proceed. That's different than, I think that is a different exercise than, it's simpler than doing that same calculation for a first flush and a bank fill, and that is going to result in more storage of volume if you do both of those. And so what we're talking about here, I think, I don't know what a bank fill is versus a first flush. I'm presuming that it's sort of splitting the difference a little bit potentially, and that we're saying, yeah, what this means is we might not end up with as much detention as you would have under a site plan, but we're going to still have a comfortable amount of water quality improvement.
If I can ask just one more thing based on, so that is how I understood it. And I like this idea that if you do this, it counts for that. It'll take care of that volume. And the other things that I didn't really understand, the bankful things I didn't really understand, we're taking them a little bit out of the picture. So, but you just said detention, and I think it'd be retention, right?
Sorry.
And that's okay. No, it's just that I was trying to follow that, and I'm trying not to be confused, which is my daily struggle. And then when you said that 50% of land area in the city is covered by detention, this is before Commissioner.
15.
Yeah, 15. I'm sorry. I'm sorry what I said. I meant to say 15. I was reading it, whatever I said. When you said it was covered by detention, was that a blanket term for you, meaning detention and retention?
I believe so. I was Scout's Honor, our stormwater manager. I promised her I would share that with you as to the importance of when activity is happening, and every incremental bit that we can do to improve our system matters, whether it's a single rain barrel or a larger pond with water quality and storage and reduced managed outflow. All of that matters in the context of only 15% of I'm interpreting that what she meant is 15% of our land has infrastructure in place to help manage it. Everything else is just a free-for-all. When it rains, it goes where it goes.
Right. So we want to get, in other words, if we want to maximize the opportunity to facilitate people installing retention and or detention, whichever they choose, it's probably going to be retention, then we don't want to price it out of the market. We don't want to attach it to things that are or look like site plans, because the projects won't happen and the stormwater management won't happen either. And so I think that this simplifying way of doing it and setting the 2-inch standard rather than the 1-inch standard, I think this is an elegant solution to a potentially sort of complex and expensive and therefore not going to get realized problem. Am I oversimplifying? But I just feel like this is great.
It sounds pretty brilliant to me. I do want to, so that's the feedback that I was looking for. So we're going to go back to work with our stormwater staff to propose this. That's kind of the direction I was looking for. I think what I am going to take from this is working on sort of a new version of our 1 and 2 family worksheet that is going to be our 3-4 family 1,000 square foot plaza 300-foot addition worksheet that is probably going to use a process that we already have and then apply it perhaps with this higher 2-inch standard to this different category of properties. And so that feedback is really exactly what I was looking for. I do want to go back to that team now and propose that to them. They are the ones that are going to have to be reviewing, managing, determining that. So, we've had great conversations with them. And in fact, I specifically talked to them, we're hopeful to bring this back to you in a month with all of those changes completed. So.
Commissioner Sauvé or Commissioner Gabrandel, do you want to, was that in response? Okay. Commissioner Sauvé, then Commissioner White, then Commissioner Gabrandel.
2 things. One, if we're talking, I like the 2-inch, especially if it does the 85%. Would that apply to the 1 and 2 family as well? Are we just going to upgrade first flush standards to all first flush standards, not just these new columns?
It's definitely something we can look at it.
I think that would be ideal. I mean, if that's what we're like, why not? If it's going to capture a lot of it. And the next, given this kind of easier rubric and kit of tools to do some of these upgrades, this feels like the first piece of site plan light, maybe. So I don't know, it's probably not like a thought exercise right now, but it is just something I want to bring up, that this does feel like an opportunity in the deeper weeds of how to resolve site plan light, that this is the first thing to tackle. So as you're going back and vetting this out through this process, seeing how it could be evaluated in that tipping point of that area, I'd be interested to kind of see that conversation come back. And if how we've reset this tool with that graph and those worksheets, it could probably be expanded upon, which I think would be great. That's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Weich.
I just had a question about the rain gardens. Who manages that? Does that come? It's not in the UDC, as far as I could tell. On the website, there were some recommendations, but not a specific set of guidelines outside of a minimum of 130 square feet and 18 inches. And then I wondered where the size of the rain garden proportional to the impervious space, and were there some minimums around that, because rain gardens can actually be pretty costly based on just my preliminary research, depending on whether I'm thinking of the homeowner or, if we ever get to an exclusionary zoning that allows for a multi-dwelling in one of the residential spaces, having to put this in and then sort of not expecting it. So like, I'm just trying to link the two things together. So I'm building like a AUD, or I'm building an addition onto my house that, because I have a driveway that's pretty long, I have sidewalks, I have the actual physical space, plus this new addition. Now I'm about to jump into this threshold. And the rain garden is a solution, which I think we're all in agreement with. And I'm not questioning that. I'm just trying to understand, like, oh, do I have to build a 300 square foot rain garden on this side of my house? And then rain barrels and that. And then as I walk into that, where I heard the worksheet, so that could be the answer, which is you get that worksheet while you're in the midst of this planning process. And so when I go to do my design process with my architect, they're going to say, hey, you're going to exceed this code and you're going to now need to build these extra things in. So let's add another $4,000 to $6,000 for our rain garden so that we can capture all this water. So like, as I was following the conversation, that's what I was doing. If anybody wants to say, nope, you're way out of line, it's like $400, this will be great, let's move on, I will accept those answers.
Well, I can start. Ultimately, I think you sort of got to the answer as part of your question. The property owner is, of course, responsible for the installation, maintenance of the rain garden. But as far as the design of it, that's sort of the intention of the worksheet, is also to empower the property owner to make design decisions about that rain garden to achieve the goal. I'm happy to, I'll actually, because we're talking about it, I'll share that worksheet with the whole commission, perhaps after this meeting, just so you guys have a reference. But there's a series of potential responses to that calculation that you need to get to. And the rain garden is simply a plugging in, how wide is your rain garden going to be, how long is it going to be, and how deep is it going to be. And that worksheet gives you a volume for that. If that gives you the ability to say, okay, as I'm considering those options, do I want to make that rain garden of a size to accommodate all the volume? Or I also get so much credit for a rain barrel if I put it on my house too. And so it gives you sort of a planning tool to sort of pick and choose the options to get you to that goal. As far as cost, I don't know, but I think I presume one of the great things about rain gardens is they're not sort of $4,000 to $6,000. There are a lot of native plants and grading, but I'll leave that to maybe somebody else who knows.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gabrandel.
So I would say cost-wise, first of all, like if you put anything over 200 square feet at this point, you're required to do this anyway, no matter what you're doing. So it's like, this is already like happening and it's been happening for a while. So this is not a new thing. All the builders know about it at this point, and we have a reviewer at the city that does this. I guess what I would have Mr. Letter check is like, does he have the capacity to be able to review all these other ones too, which would definitely add to the workload. I mean, I don't know how often this is happening, but or how we, often we anticipate this to happen, but it would definitely be adding more, for this kind of thing. The cost is not that crazy. It definitely costs, but it costs the rest of us if you don't do it. We pay for it in all kinds of ways, in terms of flooding, in terms of what we're handling with our creeks. we need people to realize that the impacts they have when they build something that has impervious surface, we're all paying for that. And so I think that people should be paying for some of that themselves, because you can't just push it on down the line and have the next, the next person in the watershed take it on for you. You have to hold some of this back. And so I think it's okay that we're spreading that cost around, and that everybody, I think, all of a sudden also realizes, oh, my little bit matters. My little, shed that I'm putting up, or patio I'm putting up, or addition I'm putting on, or whatever, that matters. And I do need to take responsibility for this, and engages people in a way that I think is really important in terms of understanding all of our, stormwater is one of those things where it's like all of us doing our little thing adds up to a big problem. And there are sites that are uncontrolled and huge, and those are big problems too. But I think it's important that we all do start to understand our impacts on these things. So I'm okay with people paying. It's also not like a massive amount of money either in terms of building these things. It costs, they can range anywhere. I mean, I teach a class at the county. You can do these things for free if you put in your own labor and you come to all the plant swaps, which are currently posted all over the Washington County Rain Garden website. You can get donated plants. You can figure it out if you want to do it yourself for free with your own labor. But you also can pay somebody else to do it too. So it can range a lot. It can literally be like nothing to maybe it's like $9 a square foot or something like that. But in terms of the amount, you're actually, the area, like when you do the calculations for these things, they end up being pretty small. They really are. That's why partly I think that we should maybe up, like Mr. Leonard, I'd like you to sort of explore really what that first flush is, like how things are changing in terms of climate. And this addresses what, the caller was talking about before, thinking forward a little bit with some of this. And so maybe raising that bar a bit in terms of what we're asking people to be able to infiltrate into a rain garden scenario. So the other thing is that one layer that I would add to this that makes it a little bit more regulatory, but I think the performance will be better, is to follow some of the standards that the county has for what a rain garden, what they accept a rain garden to be, because, and it's not that it's going to be that the person reading their whole handbook and, all of that kind of thing, but just providing some specific specifications about how deep, because what you don't want is something that's 3 feet deep and 5 feet across, because it drowns the plants. They don't survive that much. And so then you're like not harnessing their power. And they have a standard of no deeper than 8 inches. And so I think that would actually be a fine thing to use as a standard. They have a standard detail. It's something you guys could incorporate probably pretty easily into the system. And then that ends up, so it makes it a little bit less like complete and total freedom for the person who's, going through the worksheet, but it still seems totally reasonable in terms of like plant survivability, still being able to fit it on the site, and being able to, meet the standard that we're trying to just get some level of water quality dealt with by taking all of the stuff that comes off of pavement and having it be in a rain garden rather than rushing into the system and polluting our streams. And also, like, if we're doing 2 inches, that's a little bit of volume there too, this being held back. So I think that having that a standard detail or some specifications about like some restrictions on that, because I've seen just some hits around town. They're just kind of like, wow, it just doesn't have to be like that. And the plants just are not that happy in a situation like that. And our plants are a big part of how these things actually work and function. So I'm also happy to kind of talk further offline about this too, because I just do it all the time for my work. So I'm happy to talk further about it if you want to get further into the weeds, so to speak, on it.
They're native plants, they're not weeds, right, Commissioner Gabrandel? Anything else? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
This is unrelated to stormwater, if that's okay. Although I feel like convinced now to put in the rain garden. I appreciate the footnote, one, for the not applicable, or the NA kind of meaning that it's not going to require a site plan. I still think, I could be wrong, but I still think that there's 2 different types of NAs on this table. I think it's just in the new construction section of it, because there's an NA meaning that a site plan is not required, but that's a project that can exist. And then there's an NA that's like, the construction of residential buildings in residential districts, you're not going to do in that all other uses piece. So it's like two different types of NA. So I wonder if there's a way to just sort of like black it out, if that is a scenario that like just could never happen, just so that we don't have like two different things and just like extra confusion. Cool. That's it. I learned a lot about stormwater, so thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Staff recommended that this be postponed until October 5th, the first meeting in October. Would anyone like to move that postponement? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Gibb Randall. Any discussion of the postponement? All in favor of postponing this until October 5th, please raise your hand or say yes, and that is all of the hands. So this is postponed. We'll talk about it in a month. Next up is item 10A, which is the 660 Earhart Road site plan and wetland use permit for city council approval. The order of operations for this will be that the petitioner will have up to 10 minutes to provide a presentation of their project, and then Mr. Chang will fill in the staff's perspective, and then we'll have the public hearing before we discuss it. And all of the squares are moving, so.
From the project team, would anybody be sharing a visual as part of your presentation?
We had not anticipated putting a presentation together. We were informed that we'd have a 10-minute window, but we can certainly talk through the project. And I have some things I can certainly share if that helps. Good evening. My name is Alex Martin. I am the division president for Toll Brothers here in Michigan. I'm joined by several members of our team, Scott Hansen, as well as Matt Bush. We're proposing a 57-unit single-family detached home project and community on this property. We have gone through a number of staff reviews and comment sessions, and the project that's before you we believe has been fairly well vetted at this stage, considering we're at the Planning Commission preliminary site plan approval. We're really excited. We have completed a number of projects within the city as well as the township. And like I said, we're excited to bring another Toll Brothers community to the area. The community was designed to be thoughtful, not just to, what's the best use of the property, but to also work within the natural, constraints of the project and the natural disturbances and minimizing those to the best of our ability. And ultimately, each home, will have some green features to it, like EV charging stations, knowing that we're trying to build not just for today, but into the future as, the world itself evolves. In an effort to be respectful of our neighbors, we did conduct a neighborhood meeting. It was attended by approximately 100 participants. Letters were sent to neighbors within at least 1,000-foot boundary of the project. As a follow-up to that individual meeting, we did meet several times with the Earhart Village Condo Association board and property manager to address any questions or thoughts that they had, being that they were the property immediately north of our property line. Like I said, we're really excited for the project, and we're certainly here to answer any questions, whether they're marketing related and or specific as it relates to design and construction and development.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Chang.
Yes. I don't know if I have the option to share the screen. I could probably put up, it may be a little helpful to probably put the site plan up and give a little more detail. And while I'm waiting to, oh, share, there we go, share the screen. It is zoned R1B. Let's see if I can find. Let's see if I've got it. Let's see if I can find it. Which is, it's got US 23 to the east. It's got Green Hill School to the north. It does have residential also to the north. It's got Concordia University to the south, and a church and residences to the west. Unfortunately, I am having problems show all windows. Let me see if I can find. Go. I think this will help as far as a layout. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. There we go. So as you can see a little bit of Green Hill School to the north. Let me get it so it's there, so I can at least. This is the proposed layout, the 57 single-family homes that were proposed with one access point off of Earhart Drive. It was reviewed and approved by the fire marshal because previously it had two drives that didn't meet the turnaround code. Stormwater detention located in the southeast portion of the site. This is a little confusing because it's actually on 2 pages the way that it's laid out. So I'll kind of scroll down. That's the southern portion of it. There's the other detention pond. It will be outletting. Here is one of the wetlands. They do require to have a wetland use permit approved tonight by Planning Commission. That is because they are discharging into the wetland and also boring under, which is going to connect to a sanitary sewer. But there are no structures that will be in the wetlands. The approval is also contingent upon a land division with Concordia University to carve this out and then connect a portion of it with the parent 20-acre parcel. It's approximately another, I think, 10 acres that there will be adjoining. There are significant natural features on site. I believe we have the city forester here who can go into greater detail. I will, off the top of my head, I want to say there's going to be a mitigation of $230,000, something along those range. That's why there'll be a development agreement with this. There will also be a parks contribution in the range of something around $35,600. That'll also be part of the development agreement. As I'm going through, this may give you an idea of, there's woodland. This site really has all the natural features on it. It's got landmark trees, it's got woodlands, it's got wetlands, it's got steep slopes. So any questions you have, it has been reviewed. It does have alternatives analysis, but we can get in further, I think, with the city forester who's reviewed all the natural features. So with that, I'm happy to refer to the site plan. And if you have any questions, I'm available. I'm hopefully available to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Could I just, this may come up later, but Chris, could you, I think one of the things we've learned is that there's some planned road improvements planned for this area as well. Chris, could you just kind of give a quick overview of what's planned for Earhart Road?
Yes, in fact, I coordinated with the engineer and spoke with him, and they had a public meeting just last week. It's a resurfacing project for Earhart Road. They will be installing bike lanes on both sides of the road. There is sidewalk proposed as part of the Earhart development, but they will, as part of the resurfacing project, that's going to be a future project to actually connect the sidewalks eventually. So, there is something, and that's supposed to take place in the spring of 2022.
Very good. All right, then we'll move to the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed 660 Earhart Road site plan and wetland use permit. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on this item and you've dialed in, please press *9 on your telephone. If you've joined us via the stream through Zoom, you can use the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. For phone access, you can call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. Staff will select callers that have raised their hand. I see some already in the queue. You do that by pressing *9 again. And as always, if you can please mute any background sound so that we can hear you clearly, and if you can state your name and address at the beginning of your comments, please.
Caller with phone number ending with 534. Caller ending in 534, you have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Thank you. This is Tom Stallberg again, calling from Lower Town. I have a question relating to our recent accessory dwelling unit ordinance revisions, which, if you recall, would permit accessory dwelling units on every single-family zone lot, including every lot that would be in this development. I would think also that we do not prohibit non-owner occupied accessory dwelling units, so a non-owner occupant could own a home and an ADU on the same lot. So with this development coming in as a new development, recently, how many new single-family subdivisions have we had proposed since we passed this ADU revision? Normally in the bylaws, the development regs, there often can be prohibitions against such type structures and such type ownership. So I'm wondering in this particular one, and I know the petitioner doesn't have to answer me, but I'm hoping that one of the commissioners would think about this question and asking them whether these will be prohibited or by the developer themselves. And we do have some control because there is a development agreement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller identified as KB. Caller identified as KB. You can unmute and address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes.
Okay, this is Ron Stempier. I live on Earhart, Pine Bray, and Earhart. And in the 660 Earhart Development Agreement, item P20 is about noise control, and I'll read part of P20. The developer shall review existing noise sources surrounding said development and incorporate necessary design and construction techniques to ensure that future tenants will not be exposed to noise sources in violation of Chapter 119. Chapter 119 deals with various noise sources, and the big noise source here is southbound M23. If anyone has stood on this property or adjoining neighboring properties, you'll feel the ground shake from some of the empty trucks going on M23, not only the full ones, but the empty trucks. And you will also be shaken by the engine braking that many of the trucks going 80 miles an hour that are heading to an on-ramp on M23. So P20 says that the developer shall review existing noise sources. I think we should take this very seriously, and because this southbound M23, without this being looked at carefully, the city could be in for some clamoring tenants in the future of these houses to build a noise barrier wall. So consider in this plan that a review must be done, and we consider the noise for two reasons: not only the future tenants, but the existing tenants that live along Pine Bray and to the north, where the existing trees, which many of which large pines, which already are a noise barrier. Once they're taken down, the noise of M23 will be filtering through even more.
30 seconds.
Okay, and so first, include noise barriers into construction design and techniques for future tenants, and also provide for noise abatement for the trees that are being removed. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a number of other folks who've joined through the Zoom stream. If you'd like to provide a public comment, you can press the raise hand button, which should be beneath our faces in the middle of your screen. All right, seeing no hands, I will go ahead and read the motions. We have two. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Concord Pines site plan and development agreement subject to combining the lots and approving the land division prior to issuance of building permits. And then the second is the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the wetland use permit for the Concord Pines development. Can I have a commissioner move these? Moved by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Dish. Is there any need from anybody's mind to take them separately? We can discuss them together. Okay, great. Anyone want to start with comments or questions? Commissioner Gibrandel.
I guess I just don't feel like there was really much of a real description of what is being taken out of this site. When I read the review, it was pretty astounding to me, the number of landmark trees that are coming down. And so I would like the developer to present that information to us. I feel a little like we're, not getting the whole picture here with the presentation.
And maybe Matt Bush is our engineer. I think he could answer that for us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So in the site plan package on sheet 8, there's a natural features plan. It kind of goes over a description of the breakdown of the woodlands on site versus the trees on site and the basal area calculations and all the detail there. But essentially what we have here is, and it was in, I believe, the summary that Chris put together, but we do have a certain number of landmark trees that are coming down. We're fully mitigating for those per ordinance. We're replanting on the 50% requirement or more on the site. And just to kind of give you a lay of the land, the north side of the site where we're predominantly have the development placed is not classified under the basal area calculations as city woodlands. If you jump on Google Earth, you can go back to historical aerials and you can see it was like an old pasture use or some sort of agriculture use. It's kind of grown back with shrubs. And then to the south, it's qualified kind of on the natural features plan, but the south is, wooded area, and we are mitigating for all the wooded trees on the south section because they classify as woodland area. We are mitigating for all the landmark trees on the site, but it's considered an urban or an isolated with a bunch of mid-story ground layers that don't function as a self-sustaining ecosystem and a bunch of lower story invasive species. So the kind of chunk of green in this area is not a highly functioning woodland ecosystem to begin with. But on top of that, what I will say is that we are saving where the more dense trees on the south. We are dedicating most of the open space on the south side. We are going through cost measures to install vertical walls to limit the disturbance areas outside the limits of the units, and we are incorporating large setbacks from the adjacent properties in order to save as many trees along the perimeters of the property as possible. So the details are in the site plan, and there are quite a few trees for sure, but I believe we're meeting the ordinance, and we're finding a balance to be able to still use the land without clear cutting the whole thing. So.
And just to answer your question too, there are 447 landmark trees on site, and we're proposing to remove 311. That's about a 30% save and a 70% removal.
Perhaps the city forester could get on and describe her thoughts on I read, what was there. I went back and looked at the old aerials and saw there's a pretty sizable pine plantation and things like that in that lower portion that looked like it was planted, before 1960, but after 1940. So that's clearly not like native woodland. However, there were a lot of oaks that were coming down. And so I would, and I know it's probably not functioning at the same level as some of the other native woodland fragments that are in that area, but I would be, and I just butcher your name every single time, City Forester, and so I'm not even going to say it. But I would be, so you should get around it by saying your first name, but I'm just going to allow you to speak with your title rather than addressing you by name. I apologize, but I would like you to weigh in. I realized they were meeting the code. I was rather astounded by how much was coming out, and that there seemed to be some attempt at the very perimeter of saving things, but there really was like zero attempt in the middle. It was just basically plow it all down, make it blank slate so that we can put our houses in here. So I was a little disappointed to see that. So I'd be curious to get your take on, I'm sure you've been out there to kind of see what's going on, understand what's happening. And I would just be very curious about your own assessment, as a forester and what you saw.
Yeah, when this was first presented as a pre-sub, obviously I had a lot of concerns when I saw the sheer volume of trees coming down. When I went out and looked, and when I was looking back at the history of it, if this were a higher quality woodland area, and because there are so many invasives there, I didn't have as many reservations. Of course, I'd like less to come down, but because they're meeting code and it's not top quality woodland, it's not even really mid-level woodland, based on mitigation measures and the fact that they weren't building out to the maximum that this site under its zoning would allow. I could stand behind it and say approval as long as they met all measures for code.
And so basically, I don't know how you could put that many trees on the site in terms of the mitigation. So that's where the price tag comes in, is that's making up the difference essentially.
Yes, they're putting 50% of the mitigation on site, and then they're doing proposing alternative mitigation of 50% to go into the city's fund that we use to fund tree planting elsewhere in the city. There's no way to put.
I know there's not.
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
There's absolutely no way to do it.
Is there any kind of way to focus it? I mean, I know one of the things that part of this site flows to Fleming Creek. That's the highest quality creek we have that's flowing through the city. I would be especially curious. I mean, again, I know they're meeting code, and so there's only so much we can do about that. I would be especially interested in, I guess, measures that would additionally shade and protect that creek as it flows through the city. I know there's not a lot of places where it does, but that's one of that is by far the healthiest one that we have in terms of water quality and erosion and things like that. So I would be interested in, because it's going to a general fund, thinking about ways that it could bolster that creek shed in terms of protections for it. I realize you only have so many options in terms of public land and things like that. But that's something that I would be interested in, because I know the whole site doesn't flow there. Some of it just flows down to the Huron River as well, more directly, but some of it does flow to towards Fleming Creek as well. So again, that's sort of beyond the site plan. But that would be my 2 cents, I guess, in terms of that, because that is one of our better quality creeks.
Well, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys, I think, have the authority to say you don't want or don't recommend paying 50% into the tree fund, or what we call the tree fund. It's really just what we plant out of. But that if you wanted them to direct plantings into a specific park or specific area, then they could work with, we'd bring in someone like Hillary or whatever. I'm okay with it going into the tree fund, but that is an option I think that you guys have, is to say, no, we want the trees to go in the ground in a specific area.
That's a lot of trees in one area.
Yes.
I don't know.
It's a lot of trees, period.
Yeah, right.
I don't, just a thought. If there was something that you wanted that, you know, to have on a plan for approval, for mitigation, for trees to go somewhere, that would be another option.
Another option, okay.
Anything else, Commissioner Gibrandal?
Not for now.
Okay. Commissioner Weich?
Okay, Commissioner Gibrano did all my tree things. I do want to, because I wrote down a lot of notes about the trees because it was 74%, not 70, of the landmark trees that were being removed. I think it is helpful to hear from the city forester around the quality of the wood, or how you relate it to that. And I wondered, Mr. Leonard, if when this comes before council, there could be an attached report that details that, because if my memory serves, there was a big council conversation around a parcel on Packard related to all of the landmark trees. And so having watched council last night and its discussion around the sidewalk on Getty's, anything we can do that sort of mitigates a repeat of the conversation that we're having now with council, I think would be helpful. So I don't know if there's a separate report that can sort of address the fact that this woodland is not of a quality that would want to be preserved. And that's why the forester is willing to accept the offerings from the petitioner. Is that something we can request?
We can definitely clarify that. To be clear, Tiffany and the petitioner spent a lot of time on that tree inventory and assessing what's there and the condition of it. But I take your point well. We can do a better job to communicate that summary and that process and conclusion to the council than we have to you here.
Yeah, because it's just in the site plan, and if you aren't conversant enough with the site plan, you're going to read that 74% of landmark trees are being removed, and it's gonna. I don't want to telegraph to the petitioner what council is going to do, but go back and watch council meetings around landmark trees.
And I would tack on to that relative to Commissioner Gibrandal's point. I think that we could explore with parks, for example, if there are some distinct areas that might be appropriate. We're happy to pursue those as well. I don't think that would be a huge adjustment in that street tree escrow, but I'm happy to work with city staff here and at Parks and Recreation to see if there's something that might be worthwhile pursuing there. But at least as it's framed now, it's going to go somewhere for good, for sure.
Okay, I have a few more things, if that's okay. All right, so sidewalks, the petitioner made a comment about sidewalks in phase 2 or something. Could that be clarified? Because the site plan, or at least what am I looking at now? The report says that there's sidewalks on the interior and then they will connect to the public. And so I just want to be clear. I want to be clear that sidewalks are being installed at the time of the construction and not at a later phase. Did I misunderstand something?
Yeah, so the private road, which is the interior road, they will have sidewalks on both sides of the private road that will connect out to the sidewalk fronting their site, along Earhart Road.
Okay, so there will be sidewalks in the property as it's constructed, not later added.
Yes.
As I'm looking at the site plan, and someone please help me. Is it normal for petitioners to address the A20 goals in their construction, or is that just something that we raise here at planning?
I would say that the latter, because it is not codified
Into code yet. So like the electrification of the property, whether it's using natural gas or electrification, whether there's solar. I did hear the petitioner talk about the EV, and is that EV ready, EV capable, EV installed? I was scanning
it is EV
very quickly.
ready, which is required by code. So they have 57 garages that will be EV ready.
Okay. And then there isn't, and I can keep directing these to you, Chris, thanks for answering, or Mr. Chen, sorry. Where are we with electrification or solar in this site? Was there any consideration for that from the petitioner?
There wasn't, but if they wanted to expand on that, I would probably punt that to the developers.
Okay, the petitioners are here. Do you want to talk about why you didn't include that in this site?
Absolutely. Solar is something we do offer as an option or upgrade to our homes. So it's not that we would make it a mandate or a requirement, but it's certainly something that if someone felt it was important to them, they can certainly purchase that. So that's typically how we handle solar. And then just from an aesthetic, we typically don't want the solar panels visible from the streets. That's a big consideration from just a streetscape and appeal perspective. So that's most of where we have the green energy upgrade packages. Certainly a lot of smart home technologies built into the homes to manage HVAC controls during the day when maybe you're not in the home versus when in the evenings. So that way energy conservation is capable. That's predominantly smart home technology.
Okay, so you just make it as an add-on to the floor plans that you have for the homes that you sell within the property.
That's correct. So there's a standard smart home package. Everything can be, everyone has thermostats and controls that are remote today. There's certainly upgrades above and beyond that. And our customers, personalize their homes to whatever effect is most important to them. And same thing with solar panels. All of them. The take rate is actually very low. But people certainly have the opportunity to add that to their home if they so choose to.
Okay. And then I did want to ask the question around the mitigation of the sound once the removal of those trees off of 23. You said there was some consideration around that. I think Mr. Bush said something to that effect, but I could be misattributing something to him, like trying to figure out how to mitigate the sound off of 23 into the development. No?
Yeah, I didn't mention anything with regard to the sound, but
I thought you were talking about it when you discussed the trees, because you were saying there was something about trying not to go all the way to the edge and trying to create some kind of sound barrier.
And that's what I was just going to remind, is that we are leaving some large buffers from 23 and elsewhere on the site from the perimeters. So, from the property lines, I believe it's over 50 feet to the right of way of US 23. So we're leaving some significant buffers along the perimeters there. And also along the Pine Bray, we're to the south there, we're leaving some significant tree buffers as well. So
yeah, I think just to add on to that too, there's a significant amount of topo on this site. And I think a lot of that helps with the sound as well. And we did the best we could to try to match the existing topography. So we're trying not to cut down ridges. We just tried to stick. So a lot of that topography will stay similar to what it is today too.
Okay. And then another question either for you, Mr. Leonard, or Chair Mills, is around, geothermal was a thought that I had, but I know that that's not in the code yet, but it was really around like microgrids. Like, as these new developments come in, is there anything that is accessible to us in terms of the build out that would make the development more amenable to a microgrid should the residents choose to solarize their community? Is there anything with either, and this is to staff as well, is there anything inside the UDC that would allow planning to either require, requests, or demand sort of the build out to allow for that kind of microgrid capability? Because doing it after the fact, I know, is cost prohibitive for most neighborhoods, but since we have an opportunity with a new development, is there anything that would allow us to get that, since we can't get a solarized community?
Happy to take a stab at it.
And then those are my questions. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, the short answer is that there's nothing in the UDC now that would require that. I will. It's sort of an ongoing discussion at staff, and I think with a lot of boards and commissions, such as the Planning Commission and other other advisory boards in the city too. One of the particular challenges when you start talking about microgrids and whether it be geothermal or solar is there are state regulations, and I'm not going to go much further than this because I don't profess to know them, but I think that there are limitations in the ability to move energy between properties. And I think that there are real differences as to the ownership structure of those properties. That is, 2 apartment buildings owned by a single entity versus 2 condominiums owned by different people, I think have the potential to be regulated differently in the ability for those types of smaller collaborative systems to be set up. That said, and going back, I think a little bit to your other question, we do talk to petitions about the city's climate goals, regardless of them being in code. At times we do bring up those creative ideas about microgrids or geothermal systems. But I would generally say that the combination of legislative barriers, that we are regulated by a building code that we don't have a lot of ownership over to modify, although we can advocate for it. And some of those things really being more in that category of sort of building code requirements as opposed to land use requirements makes it challenging to require from a land use perspective. I think there are opportunities for us to figure out ways to incentivize it using land use tools. I think requiring is probably more of a challenge.
Thank you.
I would just add to that point, everything that Brett said was right. And in the petitioner's discussion with DTE, saying that this is something that might be of benefit to their neighborhood, microgridding, so that the power might stay on if there is an outage in the future. The more that DTE hears that may incrementally move us towards some of those policy changes that right now are hindrances. So Commissioner Dish and then Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yeah, I have just 2 questions. I also did want to raise the question that Commissioner Weitz just raised about whether geothermal would be appropriate for this site. It's a relatively self-contained site, and whether it would add prohibitively to the cost. I noticed in the land use element that, yes, certainly this residential use is recommended here, but the land use element also said that it would be great to have mixed housing. And of course, we're not getting a mix. We're getting 57 single family homes, which is what we're getting. It's not the most efficient way to use our open land. And so I would love to see an efficiency boost by not having this be infrastructure that's going to be fossil fuel dependent for the next 60, 70, 80 years. But I understand that that's out of my control, but I can still express my vision. And I just wondered if Mr. Chang could specify I'm delighted to hear that there's an Earhart Road resurfacing, thank you, and bike lanes on both sides. I wondered from where to where? How far are we talking on Earhart?
I asked that question. Now I've got to go back in my memory bank. I want to say, I have to look at my notes here. It's not all of Earhart because that question came up. It is a segment of Earhart. If you give me a second, I'm going to see if I wrote it down in my notes, and I'm going to give you specifically where that's at. Let me see if I've got it.
Anything else, Commissioner Dish or Commissioner Hammerschmidt? Go ahead while Mr. Chang's looking up his notes.
I had a question about the Earhart Road improvements too, so I'll be interested in that answer. So I live about a mile from this site, and I drive by it almost every single day. And I think a lot of my questions and comments, I share a lot of what Commissioner Dish said. This is what we're getting, but I just sort of feel like the state of the world that we're in right now, the challenges that we're facing, like, it just feels kind of basic to me. I know this is what you guys do, but I guess I'm disappointed that there's no park element included. Like, fully appreciate the $35,000 contribution to parks, but you're putting in 57 single family homes. I'm imagining that they're probably going to be like 2,000 to 2,500 square feet. I would also imagine that families are going to be moving into these homes. It's pretty proximate to King Elementary School. There's nowhere for these kids to play except for in their own yards. And, that's great and all, but like houses located in close proximity to public parks have higher value than, houses that aren't. And there's really no parks in this area for kids to play in. I read through the transcript of the public meeting that you had that was really helpful. And there was mention in there of a pocket park, but maybe that was removed at some point. I'm not sure because I didn't see anything about that in the staff report. But I also read something about a trail that was cutting through this that somebody had mentioned, and connectivity into these other neighborhoods. This just feels to me like an island. I don't know if it's possible to make connections into like the neighborhoods that are directly north and south. It sounded like if current residents are saying that there's a trail, like maybe there was, but again, I didn't see any mention of that outside of that transcript. So I don't know, Mr. Chang, where'd you go? Did you find any of that information?
I did.
Okay.
It was actually in an email, not in my notes, so I knew I had it somewhere. 200 feet north of Getty's Road to 200 feet south of the Green Hills entrance.
200 feet north of Getty's Road is where it's starting.
For the resurfacing to 200 feet south of the Green Hills entrance.
Okay. I have absolutely no idea where that is to where that is. But does that encompass this stretch?
Yes.
Okay. And when that road resurfacing is done, which I am delighted about because Earhart Road is a mess, is the city putting inside? Is this part of the sidewalk millage that we're filling the sidewalk gap?
That it's a sidewalk gap program that they said that will be put in incrementally. I believe the city may be participating in the future of those sidewalks, but it won't be immediate. It won't be part of this project.
So is the petitioner required to put in sidewalk
for their
stretch?
sections? Yep, for their stretch.
Okay. All right. Okay. The DTE thing I think came up too in the transcript of the meeting, and I will say, like, this area is prone to power outages, and I know that you're burying the power lines, but it's a lot of blown transformers and faulty equipment and stuff that DTE claims is fixed that, trust me, is not. So I was just curious, have you had any conversations with DTE about that specific issue in this area? That's to the petitioner.
I can speak to that. We haven't had any specific conversations with DTE about outages. We've only discussed capacity for the project, which they say is adequate in this area. But that was obviously a comment that came up from the Earhart Village about power outages. But no, there was no mention of that in our discussions to date.
I mean, I don't know what good it would do to bring it up to them, but I think there are a lot of power outages here, and there was some sort of infrastructure that they claimed to upgrade that was supposed to fix that issue, and it does not seem to have. So I don't know, these new residents might be coming in and like having a lot of disappointment with the number of power outages that we get.
I could add one more thing to that too. DTE did just recently clear a lot of the trees along basically their power lines that run through like across the frontage of the site too. So there are less limbs and trees in that area. So maybe that helps a little bit because this was one of the spots that was definitely not maintained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. I mean, we also just lose power when there's no wind because I think they just have like equipment issues in this area.
Okay.
The EV charging and bike parking. So I'm imagining that these homes are designed by you buy a lot and then you design the home. So is that something that just automatically is going to go into each home at like no cost to the purchaser?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, there'll be an EV charging station in each one of our homes. Some folks may never use it, but they get it anyway. All of our homes will have what we consider garage storage additions. So they're deeper than a standard garage. So they're not going to be, 22 feet wide by 20 feet deep. And if you drive a Suburban, it's end to end. There'll be about a 4-foot extension designed into the home that allows for bikes, for all the things you'd otherwise need, in your day-to-day life, besides just your car in your garage.
Okay. And since I just ranted about parks, can you explain the reasoning, like any sort of assessment that you did in looking at this particular site, looking at like the adjacent land uses and like where there actually is proximity to open space and just sort of like the decision-making process there?
Absolutely. So there was a pocket park initially contemplated in the project. And it was a byproduct of the fact that we had originally proposed a secondary exit, an emergency access for a second exit point that unfortunately was not approved by the fire marshal. So with removing that, we then had to offset the cost of that road, of removing that road with fire suppression. So where the pocket park was located, which is where the road was, exiting from the main body of the project, we replaced that with an additional, a 57th unit. So that was unfortunately a function of economics. And then we did contemplate, because there is quite a bit of open space, of what we could do to create a park. But quite frankly, the challenge would be, we're already removing enough trees. We didn't want to remove more to create paths and walkways or open space to create a park, knowing that, trees are the best amenity any of us can have. So the open space in and around the community creates a park-like setting in of itself. In particular, the western side of the project, that's a pine stand like I've never seen before. It's the closest thing to being in like a redwood forest in Michigan you're going to find. And it's beautiful back there. So as being a child that grew up across the street from the woods, that creates its own environment in park. But it's passive. If the only way to make a real park, we'd have to remove more trees, which we all agree we don't want to do.
Is the topography back there in that area like amenable to, I just noticed from the road, and I'm assuming that this is where the detention or retention or whatever I just learned thing is going to be on the southwest corner. Like it dips a lot. Like
it does. But it's walkable. Yeah.
In the area that you were saying, like I'm assuming that's closer to the east.
It's close. It's butting up to the Pine Bray portion of the project, which runs parallel to our north-south cul-de-sac. It's very walkable. This existing, you can tell people walk back there often. There's natural paths there. We walked it in the winter as a group, and as well as during the summer, and it's passable at all times.
Okay, that is good to know. Now, the crosswalk to cross, you are putting in a crosswalk, correct, to cross Earhart?
Correct.
Tell me about the crosswalk. Is it just like a lane or like a road?
It's just a striped crossing with signage. There's no push button associated with the crosswalk.
Okay, so similar to what already exists like further north.
Yeah, and there's another one I think further south as well, at Pine Bray.
Okay. And one last question, and I think this is probably to staff, based on one of the public comments. Can HOAs prohibit ADUs if they so choose? Seeing Commissioner Dish telling me yes.
I believe they can. Yes, if they put it in the association bylaws, they could limit it to single-family use.
Have the petitioners has this even come up for you guys? Or is this the first year?
No, obviously, we're a large company and we operate in a lot of states, and, ADUs are very popular in certain municipalities, but they tend to lend themselves to a different housing style. Typically, when you have an alley loaded or a rear entry garage that's a detached or attached to a breezeway, you can pop up the garage and do like an in-law suite or an apartment. Mm-hmm. These homes really aren't conducive to it because of that fact. So we're not opposed to them fundamentally. I'm not sure we even prohibit them in our HOA docs necessarily. It's just this type of home style is really not conducive to it.
Yeah, context is really important, but that's good to know that you are probably not going to explicitly prohibit them, because who knows why people decide to build them.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great, not to keep it going, but it's a great opportunity to create affordable housing. That's really what it creates. And it's some municipalities love it, others are very against it. So I'm encouraged to see, it sounds like something Ann Arbor is supportive of, which is great.
I think that is it for now. Thank you.
While we're talking about what's in the homeowners association documents, this is probably a question for staff. I'm glad to see that ADU limitations are not part of this, but I am concerned about limitations on solar on the front of the roof or like street side as something that is standard. This is for the entire development team to know that. I mean, we have super aggressive climate goals. We are going to need all of the rooftops we can get. And so limiting a roof with good solar access, which, I mean, maybe it's not because maybe you've retained enough trees, but that concerns me just overall. The question to staff is that something that we can have any discretion over in the development regs? To say like, we're not okay with you including that prohibition on where solar panels can be put.
Would the petitioner be amenable just to removing that restriction from your bylaws?
Absolutely, because quite frankly, it's a long-term benefit, not a short-term benefit while we're operating. The challenge is people don't necessarily keep up with whatever infrastructure or things they have in their home. And while solar might be important for the first resident we sell the home to, it's not to the second, and they don't maintain it well. Nobody wants that aesthetic. So, but if it's something important, again, it's a long-term concern as opposed to a short-term. So I don't think it would be prohibitive on our side if it was something. It's clearly important to the city. So we would never want to stand in the way of progress.
I think that it's only going to be more important. So I would encourage that. And likewise, I mean, I'm curious about your conversations with DTE about, getting the connections. And my understanding was that particularly for a single family home, the load that was associated with an EV charging, with EV charging can almost match what the overall load for that house is, just because there's a large draw at one time. Had that come up in your conversations? And yeah, I'll start with that question.
And not with DTE, it hasn't. And typically we see those EV stations used at night or off peak hours. So it doesn't always, you're not really drawing the same amount of energy as you are when you're at home in the evening. But it basically, we put in an outlet that's a 240 volt, 60 watt, which is similar to like an electric range. It's the same type of outlet.
So this is not a fast charge. That's going to be a slow charge on your EV. And this is a further thing just to say, like, from that homeowner's perspective, if they want to put in a power wall, the battery, like solar panels and battery, like that's going to reduce their costs associated with it. And so this is further reason to not limit solar on their roof, just to give them more options. And yeah. I have a question about the noise study that is in the development. Staff, what do you envision that study looking like?
The paragraph in the development study references chapter 119. It says that the development has to be conducted in conformance with chapter 119, which is our noise ordinance. That sets standards for things like construction activities, maximum decibel levels, the hours by which those things can be conducted. It's a standard. It's a standard inclusion in our development agreements. Frankly, whether it's included there or not doesn't matter. It is the law. We find it in the past, it's helpful to include references to provisions such as that one to make sure that petitioners are aware of ancillary requirements of the city that might relate to their developing the property. So it's not a study in the sense of and analyzing noise across an area. It is compliance with the city's noise control measures that limit how much noise can be generated by the construction and operation of the eventual property.
Got it. The part though about the bearing on what the sound thresholds currently are, the atmospheric, that's not the right word, but because it's right next to the highway, that's a noisier place.
Yeah, and that same chapter actually has additional regulations that are specific to vehicular traffic. So we regulate vehicular traffic in ways that are somewhat distinct from actually the general noise of traffic. They relate to things like maintenance of vehicles, operation of vehicles, horns, exhausts, stereos, in fact, where you cannot operate vehicles at high decibel levels based on those factors. We don't set standards on noise for the construction of housing proximate to roadways, either highways or arterial or secondary streets in our city.
Got it. So the second sentence there about reviewing existing noise sources, what I'm hearing from you is this is something that goes into every development agreement, and it is not specifically inserted because this is next to a highway.
Correct.
Okay, but to that end, have you evaluated that? And you also know that this property is on the highway. So in addition to the trees, do you have any concerns about residents asking for a wall, which may require, I would imagine, have some impact on the vegetation that's along there? Or what measures are you taking in the design to make your residents happy?
It's a great question. So certainly, it's noticeable, it's there. And typically how we mitigate it is through the construction of our homes. The reality is, once you're in your house, if it's constructed, we're going to use fiber cement siding. Our homes are framed with 2x6 material and insulation that fits that cabin. We use high-end windows. We use GAF timberline roof shingles. Our homes are built of pretty high quality. So as a result, there's a lot of noise mitigation by default of the materials we use. In extreme circumstances, and it's purely marketing, so the extreme is overcoming a marketing concern, we will install, sound reducing windows, to reduce that decibel level. You'll see that often, mostly around airports, there's noise cone issues and things of that nature. So that certainly something we'll continue to study as we plan the project. We're dealing with something similar in another project in another part of Ann Arbor right now, where it's much closer to the road, it's on the same grade, and we are installing, higher decibel reducing windows to affect it. And we've done that all over the country. So we know we can mitigate the decibel sounds quite easily. But no, good question. But we do not have an intention of installing a sound wall at this point.
Okay. Those were my questions. Commissioner Clark and then Commissioner Weich.
I just had a couple questions about the wetland permit. Is this the appropriate time to ask? Okay. So I just wanted to know, am I understanding correctly that it will just be a sanitary sewer line running underneath the protected wetland area? There won't be anything constructed on top of it?
That is correct. They're going to bore underneath the wetland.
Okay. And then is there a homeowners association, or who's going to be responsible for is that like the city's responsibility to maintain the line that's going to be running through there?
It'll be a city sanitary sewer line.
Okay. And then I was also just curious if there were any other alternative designs considered that avoided that, or if that would significantly impact the layout, and other considerations with that. And then my only other question would be, is there any connecting to pedestrian? We've talked about pedestrian access and there being sidewalks in the development, but I'm curious about connectivity to the schools next door to it. Oh, sorry. And then one more question was about if heat pumps are being considered at all for air conditioning and heating, or if it's going to be, I'm assuming, natural gas.
Yeah, so I can answer the question. So we did look at some alternatives to the sanitary sewer. Unfortunately, I don't know the specifics, but there is a sewer line that runs all the way along that kind of southwestern boundary, basically in the center line of the ditch or creek, which is the wetland. And that's the one we're boring into. The only other alternative would be to put a lift station at the southern end of the site and then pump everything back out all the way to Earhart Road. And we didn't really contemplate it, and we didn't really run it by city staff. I'm not sure what the engineering department would say regarding maintenance on a lift station. But that would be the alternative to just tapping into the sewer at the south end. And we actually had another tap in that would have been in the 25-foot buffer that we moved so that it taps in out on Earhart Road rather. So we pulled one of those taps out of the buffer. And then your question about the school, I can also answer that one too. We did talk with Green Hills School quite a bit. And ultimately their answer, and I think Chris brought this up during our review period of a pedestrian connection, was that they're a private school. And so they really didn't see the need, since there might not even be any residents who live here who actually go to the school, for a pedestrian connection. That said, they do have basically a gravel road that runs pretty much right to the property line. And I think if people do live in the sub who go to that school, I think there is just a walking pathway to get there, even though it's not something that's necessarily official.
Oh, and then just to add on to that, I'm noticing that in the permit review that there was recommendation that the city could consider a review through Eagle, and I was wondering if that had been done or if I'd missed that. And if you can speak on anything, I think it's something about a recommendation of a level 3 review. Has that been done? Or
Matt, do you want to answer that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure. As far as we will be getting a permit through Eagle, it's a very, very small minor permit, but we will be getting a permit through Eagle. Our wetland consultants, in fact, are to be filing the JPA soon, or the joint permit application with Eagle soon, if not done already. So that's something that we'll have that permit in place prior to construction plan approval. So.
Yeah, so we went through the pre-application process with Eagle. So we walked the entire site. They reviewed the flagged wetlands. We talked about the improvements we were planning to make, and that really triggered our requirement for that permit. And we have that pre-application meeting summary from Eagle that we can share with you guys if you'd like to see it. I'm not sure if that was included in any submittals or not.
Do you mind sharing, is it a market interest decision to not use any sort of heat pumps or anything like that for heating and air conditioning, or what was your reasoning?
I can answer that one. Heat pumps tend to be installed correctly are typically up in the attic space of the home. And in a climate as severe as Michigan, that's just not conducive. Typically, I operated in Northern Virginia for a number of years. We built them there, certainly in Florida. But in northern climates like this, it's really difficult to have heat pumps work when they're up in the attic space. So as a result, everything we use is typically gas.
Go ahead, Commissioner Weich.
I think my questions are for staff. So this development is within an existing ADU zone, according to the map that I was looking at for the city. Is that right? And
yes,
so
the R1B.
Yep,
yes, the single
right.
family
So
residential.
it goes all the way up to Green Hills, and then there's a little gap, but they're within it. So do these existing lots allow for an attached or detached ADU?
Well,
So
under the zoning,
so someone buys this unit, they raise their family in it. It's what are we looking at? Like average of 3,000 square feet. They're like, that's too much housing for me. My kids are gone. I want to move into a smaller unit on my property and then sell my main house. Can they do that in this development?
Well, again, it would depend on their bylaws. I mean, I think I'll defer to the petitioner.
Well, before we go to the petitioner, I just want to understand the zoning.
Yes, under R1B, it would be.
Okay, yes. So there are no restrictions. If I bought a house in there, my kids are gone, and I want to build like just a little apartment for my wife and I, and then I can sell my main property or rent it out. So the restriction would be because there's a homeowners association, and that would say that is not allowed. And then how do we, so I'm still talking to staff, how do we at planning address that? Is that something that goes into a developer agreement? Is that something we ask the petitioner for, or do we just cede it because even though it's zoned, because they have a separate agreement, they get to override the zoning?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. We do review the master deed. We typically review it though for making sure that any long-term obligations are clearly being assumed appropriately by the homeowners association. So a lot of times in developments such as this one, the developer is going to have a responsibility for the maintenance of an installation of an operation of systems such as stormwater, sanitary, you name it, other obligations. At some point, when all those properties are sold, those responsibilities transfer over to the homeowners association. So one of the things we review that for is we make assurances that obligations such as wetland requirements or other requirements are assumed appropriately by that condominium association. We do not, though, use that as a mechanism to add additional regulations. So in this case, if they were to add a prohibition on accessory dwelling units, we wouldn't really have a code standard to say you can do that or you can't do that. They have that right to make that contractual agreement similarly to a private transaction. But to your initial question, crystal clear, you're absolutely right. There is nothing in our regulations that would prohibit that. So if they were to add that and it would be prohibited, that would be also enforced by the homeowners association. We do not enforce condominium association laws. We only enforce our zoning requirements.
Sure. So they would go to, they could build it, but then they might get sued. Okay. So you've talked a lot about administration versus policy. So I just want to ask this, and then I have a follow-on question, and then I'll be done, which is we can, as planning, tell the petitioner, we don't want you to restrict homeowners within your development from building ADUs because our city zoning allows for it. They can say, thanks for that information, whatever. All right. So then the other side of that is to council. So can we, could you or staff draft a motion? Because I'd like to add a motion to this site plan that goes before council that asks council to consider a restriction on the prohibition of the development of those ADUs. So if we're going to put up a 60-year development here, and now no one is going to be able to modify that housing if they choose to in the future, if there's a homeowner association piece. And so I just want to, I don't know if that's a note to council from Planning Commission, if it's a motion that our body takes up, but I would like to telegraph to council that this is a concern within our code, that petitioners can get around what our electorate has enacted by, voting for council members who've put these things in place. And this feels, this is a carve out, and this is a fairly, I am actually quite disturbed by it because it's a privileged carve out within the code, because you have both the means and the opportunity with a complicit developer to allow you to restrict your housing in this way. So even if we remove all of our exclusionary zoning, there's still a carve out. and this is how it gets done. And then we just endorse it and it stays in our code for 60, 70 years. And then my kids can't live here in the city because we have these carve outs. So I don't know if that's a motion or if it's just a note. I've been told by the city attorney, I can't call city council and talk to them about petitioners. So I need a mechanism to tell city council that this is a problem and they need to address it.
So what I would suggest, so I think there's a lot of, well, let me backtrack that. I don't know the limitations that the city has on regulating the private relationship of transaction of property. So
yeah, sorry, I'm just smiling because
yeah. That's kind of the problem I think that we're getting to where you're coming from. And so so that's definitely a conversation we could have. In this circumstance, to I think your goal in this project, what I would recommend is, what I'm hearing from the petitioner is they are comfortable not including a prohibition on solar panels on the front of the house. They do not in fact prohibit accessory dwelling units from in their bylaws. The mechanism for, in this case, because they are offering that, what I would suggest is we will modify the development agreement to clarify that when we review the master deed in this circumstance, we will be looking for those two factors to make sure that those are being realized.
Great.
So I would say that is the mechanism in this circumstance. I think the bigger question, what you're talking about, is what is the regulatory framework that might prohibit that in the future? That warrants more conversation. I suspect it's not as easy as you and I might like it to be, but happy to start that conversation.
Sure. And then my second question, sorry, because I did say I had two. My second question to staff is, this is not the first time I've heard a developer talk about the inability to install heat pumps in Michigan. And my understanding is what was stated is not true. I talked to Dr. Schultz about it, and she has specifically stated that we can install heat pumps in Michigan and they will work. And so I wonder if, again, from a staffing point of view, is there a mechanism for us to obtain a notice, a opinion, sort of like what our forester did with the landmark trees, from our A20 folks to say it is not the case that you cannot install heat pumps. You can. And as a matter of fact, I'm a property owner and we were looking at installing heat pumps and we got a recommendation for 35 to deal with our heating and cooling in our site here in Ann Arbor. So is there a mechanism to sort of mitigate this? Because this is the second time, at least at this table, that this has been stated and it's just factually untrue. And so I'm just wondering from staff points of view if there's some other rider or something that we can provide developers to give them better information so that they will stop repeating this inaccurate information.
Yeah, we've had some conversations at Planning Commission about that technology, trying to understand it a little bit more, what its applicability is. For sure, we can do that. Again, I would put the regulation of it in that same category we talked about when we're talking about building codes.
Sure. No, I know we can't. I'm gonna channel Commissioner Dish. She was like, I know that I can't get what I want, but these are my wishes. So I'm following her lead and saying, let's get some heat pumps because we can get heat pumps, and it's factually inaccurate to state that we cannot do it here in Michigan. That's all.
Yeah, we can. It's still, I guess it would still come down to petitioners such as this one choosing to agree with that or their conventions. I think in this case.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I suspect in this case that I'm sure they have probably explored some heat pumps in climates such as ours and locally. I suspect it's as much of a economics and convention and standard practice as it is whether or not it truly functions or not. But the short answer is yes, we can definitely provide some of those resources that shows how it can be successful.
Commissioner Gibrandel.
I want to take us back to the ADU thing just a bit, and that is that I would totally be supportive of there being ADUs here. One thing that makes it tricky with this particular site, if you look at it, is that in the rear of the units, there is a 20-foot wide stormwater easement in the back of nearly every unit, which greatly constricts the zone in which you can actually build an ADU. You can't build it in the front. There's really not enough room on the sides. You really only have the back. And you're essentially like filling in the whole back side with an addition by the way that it's laid out. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of, just because these things are site specific too, in terms of what you can get away with the dimensional requirements and things like that. And you certainly can't put a structure in the middle of the stormwater easement. So just in terms of how that gets laid out, that's part of the puzzle of this as well. I think that it's, even though I'm supportive of them, I think it's probably unlikely that they would work very well with the current geometry of what's there. That's all.
Mr. Leonard.
Agree. Remember, accessory dwelling units could also be realized within the existing structure.
Right. But they can only go so far up. And so I
guess my point is you could reconfigure the space that you have.
That's right. Yep.
That's right.
Within it. That's right. Right. And so, but we can't be more than 30, the houses can't be more than 30 feet per fire code. And we're probably kind of getting in that zone. So anyway, just wanted to toss that in there.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yeah, I guess, well, I have a few things to say and to ask, but maybe I'll start by just Commissioner Gibrandal's comment about the ADUs is highlighting for me maybe a slight confusion between thinking about a single family home on a parcel and the dimensional standards that go with that versus this, where it's actually one parcel with 56 or 57 buildings. And so or correct me if I'm wrong, but like none of the plans dimension for us side setbacks, front setbacks. That's given to us as one entire thing. Is that right? In other words, the kind of density within which they build each house on its parcel is up to them, not subject to the way in which we would regulate a single family home parcel. That's a question, I guess, for Mr. Leonard or Mr. Chang.
Yeah, each one of the R1B lots, they have their own building envelopes on there that's meeting the setbacks of the R1B.
So it's 57 parcels or it's one parcel?
Well, they've got it laid out as 57 parcels. That is the layout with the setbacks shown on a building envelope.
Okay, so each of those parcels is subject to the same restrictions as any other one-off single family lot, R1B lot. Okay. I think the other thing that makes it a little bit confusing for me is that we're not really given any information about these houses. Like we have no plans, we have a few elevations that feel like kind of off the shelf elevations of other projects that are maybe specific to this development that may get built here, but there may be variations or other versions that get built here. And it's pretty rare, or maybe never, that we approve something without actually knowing what it's going to look like. And I noticed in the development agreement, P21 specifically says that the petitioner will provide elevations and that everything will be constructed according to those drawings. And if they change it, they have to take it back to City Council. And that seems to be something that in this case is getting kind of circumvented because I mean, I could speculate, I guess, on why that is, but I maybe would prefer to hear from staff about how to proceed in that. This is the first time I think I'm seeing a project like this that is not one or a few buildings where we get to see what it's going to look like on the site. The site plan is pretty diagrammatic in terms of the actual, location and look and section information of each building relative to its neighbor and to each other.
Mr. Chang or Mr. Leonard? I think that there was the question, Commissioner Abrams, right, about like, what are the elevations and how are you evaluating that standard within the development agreement? Is that?
Yeah, and there's this, yeah, there's basically part of the development agreement. I would assume it's standard language that goes into all agreements. It feels like in this case, there's a kind of exception being made, and I just would like to hear more about that.
I can address the provision. The provision is included in most development agreements. As you know, we don't have specific architectural standards for much of the city, but oftentimes those elevations are reflecting something. So when there is a significant deviation from them, we do have the option to take that to City Council for consideration. I will just say generally, there's often modifications, but they're very typically, they're pretty minor. So in this case, what we'd be doing is we'd be looking at the elevations that have been provided in the context of the site plan. I think I've got those shared right now. This was included in one of the early site plans. It's certainly available in the Track It package. And so if there was a significant deviation from those that we determined to be more significant, we would require them to present those to the City Council for consideration. It tends to have more applicability for, frankly, mixed use, non-residential buildings, oftentimes in the downtown. But again, it is a pretty similar standard that we include generally across our development.
If I can add, this idea of subdivisions, right? Like, I mean, we haven't seen a lot that are single family homes, but, and where effectively the home buyer gets to choose what their house looks like. But this is something that is not, I've seen a couple of these since being here. So this is not, but I think you're right. It hasn't been in very recent times because it tends to be more buildings that are already designed.
Yeah, whereas this is like, it's a product, I guess. And it's, you know, the petitioner is a national company that it's a kind of off-the-shelf product, I guess, that gets placed here on this site to a certain extent, even if there's some customization, which is very different than something which is site-specific and designed for a particular neighborhood, location, context, neighbors, traffic, pedestrians, etc.
And maybe this will help. I don't mean to interrupt, but you know, these homes are actually being designed specifically for this site. So they're not off-the-shelf plans. They're specifically being designed to meet the wants and needs of our buyers. So these plans, they've never been offered anywhere else in the country. So these are not just like cookie cutter, easy adapt to a certain community. So eventually there'll be a whole portfolio of at least 5 different floor plans. Each floor plan will have at least 4 different elevation or front styles to them. And then you mix in anywhere from 6 to 8 color schemes. So the variations, if you start compounding those, you know, become pretty significant and varied. And then we actually have an anti-monotony code that doesn't allow the same elevation or floor plan to be built next door or across the street from one another. So essentially you have a block of 6 homes that will not be the same. So we like variation in our communities. We rarely, if ever, just stamp houses out. That's just not what we do. But we also control the customization and personalization of homes. You know, we want to keep that aesthetic streetscape looking nice. We don't want somebody to, you know, personalize it so much they pick something that's not timeless and or, you know, aesthetically offensive, if you will. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but you're seeing the first 3 homes that have been produced, you know, in the early stages of the portfolio for this specific project.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the information. It still means we're basically saying yes to something we don't know what it looks like. And the reality is we don't actually have a lot of say over what things look like, but we usually like to see it before we approve it. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll just end by saying I agree with a lot of the kind of maybe issues brought up by Commissioner Dish and White and Hammerschmidt, that like there are many ways in which this development goes against the kinds of things that this body tries to incentivize and encourage and rally support behind in the community in terms of like density and using mixed housing type and energy efficiency and non-car centered lifestyle. And, you know, it's kind of not any of those things, but I think it seems like we don't have a lot of leverage in that regard. I just would push a little bit harder on the idea of building electrification and really please beg you to consider it. It's 56 natural gas hookups that, you know, are going to be around for decades. And I think it would be possible for this to be an all electric development. And that could even be, you know, I think those kinds of sustainable elements are attractive to a lot of home buyers these days. Yeah, and I'll just underscore the sentiments around ADUs and around solar and around a park if you can fit one in. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Thanks. I do have a question, but just sort of tagging on to what Commissioner Abrams was saying. You were saying that it made me think of Viridian at County Farm and how that development really is looking to be a leader in sustainability and net zero. And like, just in my mind, these are just like almost totally opposite. So, I mean, if you have a chance to take a look at that plan, their developer, I think would be really open to conversations like how he's doing things. Matt Grokoff seems like a great guy. I mean, again, like anything you think you could do to like push the envelope, just given again, like sort of the state we're in with like our climate crisis and like a lot of the goals of the city, I think it would just be really appreciated, even though we can't mandate that. But my question, you had mentioned that, you know, post the February community engagement meeting, you'd met several times with Earhart Village. And I was just curious if you could sort of summarize what types of things what types of discussion that was and get a sense. I couldn't really tell like how that they felt about this development coming in so close to them from that, but you have had subsequent conversations and just sort of curious how those went.
Absolutely, great question. Certainly when we had our initial neighborhood meeting, we listened, you know, and we understood that there was general concern just of change. So when we met with Earhart Village, we met with the board as well as the property manager several times, and it was really to just drill a little bit deeper into the northern boundary and what that looked like. They were very interested in understanding what the emergency access road, which we originally proposed that ran on the northern boundary of the project, and you know, what was the distancing of that road, what would it look like, and ultimately that went away, which they were very happy with. And then we also spent a lot of time talking about, you know, there's quite a bit of tree replacement. So how can we place the trees and the types of trees to create a layering effect to screen from, you know, the back of their units to our homes. So we spent a lot of time talking about tree placement and where to put them. There's actually a very nice tree on their side of the property line that we talked about making sure we stay far enough away, but still screen behind it. And then we did also talk about and educate them on the distancing between the property lines and between the buildings. I think that helped them understand that we're not going to be right on top of one another, that there's actually quite a bit of space there to ensure that there's enough gapping, you know, and ultimately we just want to be a good neighbor. That's really what it boils down to. I don't want to speak for how they walked away from that interaction, but I felt as though they felt they were heard and listened to, and we adapted to some of their concerns. So I don't feel it was adversarial and or contentious, but I'm sure, you know, if given the choice, it would stay the way it was, right? Of course. But no, I feel like it was good conversations.
So they're okay with you guys keeping lots 1 through 8 now? I saw that come up a lot in the transcript of the February meeting. I mean,
yeah,
there is
again, I think if given the if given the choice, of course, they would prefer they weren't there. It would be, you know, very bold of me to say otherwise, but I think they understand and do appreciate that, you know, there's going to be quite a thick buffer of pine trees and, you know, canopy trees between the two. And we went through all that with them and even walked them through what does that look like now that the emergency fire access has been removed. We added even more trees into that space. So that worked out quite well.
I'll just say I appreciate the fact that you did all that outreach to them and were willing to meet with them. Also, I would hope that they would have let us know, like that if they had concerns, that they would have, joined this meeting and made a public comment or reached out, hopefully if they know that this is even happening, if our processes are working correctly. So no news.
Yeah, we were in communication with them, I believe as late as last week. Weeks blur. I can't remember, it was end of last week or early this week. They asked for some additional information based on the package that was submitted and reviewed tonight. So they're engaged. They're absolutely engaged.
Great, thank you.
No, thank you.
Commissioner Weich.
Just a clarification, in that transcript, it notes that the petitioner, Mr. Martin, says that the property will not have solar as an option. And I believe in our conversation tonight, we were told that solar is an option. And so can either staff clarify that, or if it's necessary, the petitioner? It's at about 5528. Scott Hansen asked the question about solar, and Mr. Martin says, we currently do not offer solar panels. It doesn't mean we won't, but we typically don't. So in the world today, we don't offer solar, or something to that effect.
I can certainly speak to it. That was in the context of a standard feature in the home, not as an option or upgrade. That was the context in which I answered that question, a similar vein of how we discussed it tonight.
I'm still unclear, but I will ask staff a question after Mr. Leonard speaks.
Yours is not relevant to this, Mr. Leonard?
Nope.
Okay. Floor is back to you, Commissioner Weich.
In our development agreement, what are the two things that we're putting in it? The ADUs and the solar?
The development agreement, what I would suggest, you add it as a condition of your approval if desired. And the method of incorporating it would be via the development agreement. We would incorporate as part of our review of the master deed that we would be looking to make sure that there are no restrictions on the location of solar panels.
Okay.
Nor would there be any prohibition about accessory dwelling units being realized in the development.
Great, thank you.
Now, Mr. Leonard.
And I apologize, I should have directed this to Mr. Chang probably a long time ago, but maybe the petitioners could respond. Did you ever consider rezoning to a higher density for the site?
I can answer that one. When we studied the property, that was certainly a contemplation. But when you look at the plan two-dimensionally, it looks like it's very feasible to add additional units or density to the project, but being respectful of the topography, which then also impacts the natural elements of the project, we tried to follow the ridge lines of the property. So, to do anything that's denser, these are relatively small single-family lots, you would have to flatten the site, which means you're only going to disturb more of the natural area and space. So knowing that that was something that's important, not just to ourselves, but certainly, the city, we didn't want to disturb the area even more because it would be very impactful. To minimize the impact we did have on the site, many of our home sites are walkout lots, which respect the grade. And then we installed or plan to install retaining walls behind those lots to not chase the grade down the hill. If we were to build, large units of multifamily or condominiums, you'd have to flatten those ridge lines out significantly. And they are also not conducive to walkouts. So it would be an abrupt change to what you see there today. And we just felt confident that that was not what we want to do. We want to be good stewards of the environment, given our profession. But we also knew it would not be very well received based on how important that aspect of development is to the city. So that was our logic and rationale behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. That was also in my notes that I failed to read when I was talking. So thank you for asking that. Anything else? Mr. Leonard, you just talked about having a condition. Do you need us to move that?
Yeah, I'd suggest, if desired, that you amend the motion, the first motion to have it add conditions or a condition that the development agreement be modified to reflect the master deed and related documents reviewed to ensure that there are no restrictions regarding the placement of solar panels or the construction or realization of accessory dwelling units.
Commissioner Weich, would you like to move that?
I was just going to say, so move.
Would anyone like to second? Commissioner Dish seconded. Any discussion on that proposed amendment to the main motion, the first of the main motions? All in favor, we can do a hand vote on this. Raise your hand. Sorry, but I'm making, thank you. I see all of the planning commissioners have their hands up. So now we have an amended first motion, and we have a second motion as well. So it seems like we can take them together. Any other discussion of them? Mr. Leonard, you want to do a roll call vote?
I do.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Weich,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. So we will make that modification to the development agreement. We'll also, as discussed, talked about, summarize the natural features analysis a little bit more clearly as part of that communication, and on to City Council.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I did have one question. I think Commissioner Hammerschmidt, you had mentioned that there's a green development.
Yeah.
Can you give me the name of the development again one more time?
Yeah, it hasn't been built yet, but it's the Viridian at County Farm. I think they have a website. We approved it, I don't remember time, a year ago.
And it's Matt Brokoff who's doing it.
Oh, I can have, Chris can send you the link. We have all that materials available online. They also probably have a marketing website up now, I would guess. So.
Yeah, they do. Alex, I'm familiar with the site. We can discuss it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark?
I was going to add that Avalon Housing is also part of that development, has done a lot of work on the green side of it and making it more like affordable and feasible. So they're also a really good resource, and they're a little bit further ahead in their timeline, so they might be able to give you some concrete, good information.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. I feel like we are in need of a break, but we have no other items. So is it okay if we power through? Okay. Item 11 on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any issue of interest. If you wish to address the Planning Commission and you have joined through the web link, you can push the raise hand function. If you are watching us on TV and you want to call in now, one last time, the number is 877-853-5247. Our meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on those who have raised their hand. If you dial in by the last 3 digits of your telephone number or whatever name you have signed into Zoom with, you'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background sounds so that we can hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And I think I read enough of that to deal with the TV time delay. So I don't see any hands. So we're going to move on to item 13, but let me know if anybody sneaks in, Mr. Leonard. Any commission proposed business? I go ahead, Commissioner Weich.
I I would, oh, there's a person who wants to speak. Let's hear from them.
Perfect. So before commission proposed business, we will call on the person.
Mr. Stem, Ron Stem, you can unmute your phone using *6, or excuse me, unmute yourself via the button on your Zoom login.
I think you'll have to unmute yourself. I don't think we have that ability. We can ask you to unmute.
There you
Okay,
go.
can you hear me now?
We
Yes.
can. You might need to mute the background sound though. There's a bit of delay feedback.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I'm a little concerned about the 660 Earhart, the trees. I'm really concerned that it seems like we're being paid off for the 74% of the trees being removed, and given, I don't know, $235,000 to move trees to other parts of the city. It's really concerning. This used to be an urban forest, and I'm a little concerned that this vast set of pines, some of which are between 70 and 100 feet tall, which I've been working to save from the invasive species, we're just selling out to a developer when we really need a park in this area. Now, there was a little bit of talk about putting in higher density units and thereby preserving part of this pine bray, Scottish, which means Pine Hill. And I'm concerned that the forester really didn't walk this area. One person, I forget who, actually pointed out that there was a nice area of pines. I don't think they're going to conserve those pines. So I'm speaking for the trees. We're cutting down mostly these large pines, which are 60 to 80 years old, and we're being bought out to place trees in other areas. This also refers back to the noise control. So it would be better to build condos in an area where the topography would allow than putting in 57 single family units and cutting down 74% of the trees, most of which are the valuable trees. So I just want to make that clear. It's a real concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Participant identified as KB. You can unmute your link and address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes.
There you go. You should be unmuted now. Can you hear us? The person who's...
Yes.
Very good. Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Would you like to provide a public comment?
We're done. We're finished.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're done. Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 644. Caller with the phone number ending with 644. You have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Boris. I live at 1726 Charlton. And I too am concerned about all those pines coming down. But I do have some different questions about trees. Is there any difference in the capacity to mitigate stormwater between low-quality invasive trees and high-quality woodland trees? Is there a body of research on this subject? Obviously, we are being pressed by global warming and flooding. Might existing so-called low-quality trees be valuable for stormwater mitigation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 194. 194. You can unmute you can press *6 and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, good. This is Rita Mitchell calling. I was a late joiner of this meeting, but very interested in the topic of retaining trees, as others have said. And it is a sad day in Tree Town when a significant number of trees are going to be removed. I would hope that we can do more than just mitigate 50%. And I know that means crowding elsewhere, but we do have A20 goals of planting 10,000 trees, right? So perhaps there's space for even more. On another topic, I do want to commend the Commission. I was really impressed with all of your attention to the kinds of energy efficiency things that we need to do and looking toward geothermal and heat pump installations. When a new development is ongoing, this is the time to install and be ready for the future. This development, if it's passed with gas installation, that is a stranded asset that will carry forward into the future. And at this very moment, before it's built, if it is built, this is the time to plan for that future without fossil fuels. It's a great time. And there could be a lot of energy saved. So I hope that you will consider looking into that more, discuss it with City Council, Council Member Dish. That would be a great thing to do, and look forward to the future. We need to be moving in that direction as our A20 plan has directed us. So I hope you'll continue with that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Anyone else who's joined the Zoom stream, if you would like to make a public comment, please push the raise hand button, which should be below our pictures. All right, seeing none, let's go back to Commission proposed business. Commissioner Weich, you were getting ready to speak.
And hopefully briefly so that we can all go. I just wondered, is there a place on our work plan to have a joint session with council where we can talk about some of the policy and administration challenges? And I ask that because I am finding that it is difficult as a planning commissioner to talk to council about this. And it is something that I just in my 5 meetings, I've seen the challenge between the articulated goals, maybe not a vision, if I could borrow something that a commissioner said, not a unifying vision, with some of the plans that are coming before planning. And it feels like we're stuck in a lot of ways with just, approving things that are built to the UDC, but don't realize the city's stated initiatives and goals. And I feel like there's a disconnect. And I know, Commissioner Dish, that you are here also in addition to your role on council, but I don't know that you should carry that burden on your own. Obviously, I don't want to speak for you. So if you feel like, no, I will take care of it, let's do that. But I don't know if that if that is a part of the commission's work plan. And if something like that has been proposed, but I would benefit from that. And if it's not something that planning wants to take up, if either staff or the city attorney can advise me on how to do this officially, appropriately, I would appreciate it. Because the avenues that are available, like through public hearings, I am not permitted to talk to council by advice of city council or the city attorney, which would make a lot of sense. I like your face, Brett. You're thinking, you're looking for a way for me to change that, but I had a 2-hour meeting with Kevin, and in that 2-hour meeting, he was very clear that it would be inappropriate for me to address council as a planning commissioner about a petitioner's request. And I think that is the only place to make it make sense, is to say, we're looking at something, you've stated these goals, these things are incompatible. Have you thought about this? And I know there may be obvious answers to that, but it does feel kind of circular right now. And so I'm just trying to figure out an escape route. So I'm happy for any other commissioner to sideline me, as long as 4 of us don't talk together. It's not a violation of open meetings. So you could call me, just email me. I'll give you my cell phone and you can tell me what to do, and I'll be happy to listen to your sage advice. So that was all, Chair Mills. I just wanted to ask if there would be a time in our future to have a joint meeting with council.
Go ahead, Mr. Leonard.
So Commissioner White, we have done that in the past. We could do that in the future. I guess I would ask, you definitely cannot speak for the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission speaks for the Planning Commission. So I would say, whenever possible, as we talked about tonight, finding ways to make sure you're communicating via your decisions to the City Council is important. I suspect that you will find I'm speculating that you will find as much frustration at the City Council level as at this level, with goals that the city has set and barriers to simply and quickly getting there. So I think you would find a lot of shared frustration, frankly. But I think, to your point, that those conversations can maybe bear out ways that we can figure out which things we want to prioritize and resource. So those are my thoughts. The short answer is yes. I think that when you're talking about addressing projects, I was making that face because none of you lose your ability to speak to City Council. You lose your ability to speak to City Council on Planning Commission items. So, but you also have a great opportunity to speak as a Planning Commission to the City Council on a regular basis by the petitions that go forward and the other changes that you initiate or that they ask you to evaluate. So I would also say, keep in mind, you mentioned the work plan. There's always a room on the work plan. It's a question of what steps you want to investigate relative to other things. I would just generally share that my experience in 5 years with this group is that the appetite is big, and I can't always deliver you progress on all of the things that are of interest at the speed that you would like. So, but I think the group's always been really successful at making sure that those are retained, prioritizing those. And one thing we have done over the last 5 years, I think, is we've made a lot of progress on a lot of those things. So, so that's my.
No, I'm a newbie. I'm sitting in the stream of all your excellence, not criticizing it. Let me ask for a clarification, because what you just said contradicted what City Attorney McDonald said. So could you get, well, you and I can talk separately about that. Could you get a memorandum from the City Attorney on how a sitting planning commissioner could address council during a public hearing for a site plan.
You can't do
Because, okay, which was different than what I just heard you say, which is you don't lose your ability to speak to city council, which is what I said to the city attorney. And then I discovered, in fact, you do lose your ability to speak to city council.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. Well, a couple things. One, there is a mechanism where the planning commission could appoint somebody to represent the planning commission on petitions. So I want to be clear, that is a possibility. If that's the case, you are speaking though for the planning commission. You are not by no means speaking as an individual. You don't lose the ability to address the city council generally. You do lose the ability to address the planning commission on public hearings of site plans or on rezonings or on ordinance amendments or other actions that come out of this body. You don't lose the ability to address the city council on matters unrelated to your work as planning commission. I'm sorry, I didn't make that.
No, that's what the city attorney said, but you just said something different. So I was like, you just said, who do I listen to? I don't know.
My commission proposed business would be to explore whether or not we can take those limitations within the development agreement on homeowners associations and extend them as apparently the noise stuff is done. Whether that's possible to add that into any future development agreements where there might be a homeowners association.
So different things. The noise is referencing a law.
Yeah.
We're not creating a regulation. I think what you're talking about is what we added here, routinely making sure that finding out if there's a way that we can prohibit private restrictions on private property.
Yes. For things that link
that are priorities of the city, not generally priorities
exactly.
of the city.
Exactly. Not generally, but those priorities of the city. Because I actually, now that once this got brought up, I think that there's especially on the solar side, I know that's common in homeowners associations, and hadn't thought about it before. That was part that could be part of our.
It's in our regulations as well.
Yeah. Commissioner Abrams.
I just wanted to confirm confirm that I'm right in that the city of Ann Arbor is limited in its ability to regulate things like natural gas hookups because it's something that has to be fixed at the state level, and that we as a municipality couldn't do something like the city of Berkeley and remove any new natural gas hookups from new development.
That's my understanding. My understanding is that we don't have the power to make that decision. I think that there's a lot of interest in exploring if that's true, if there are modifications that could be made to the legislative framework. But my understanding, in short, is that you are right. We don't have the ability to tell you as a property owner, even though you have to power your house in this way.
I wonder, are there any mechanisms available to us? It seems like every single project that comes before us, we ask, we want these things, we ask for these things, the city needs these things. I mean, as you're saying, there's this disconnect, I guess, between the priorities and the goals and maybe the mechanisms that we have in order to realize those. But it does feel like every single petition, as a body, we say the same, in some ways, many of these things. Did you think about solar? Did you think about electrification? Did you think about heat pumps? So maybe it can only be on our work plan if there's room for us to do anything. But if there was, that seems like something really worth doing.
I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at it at incentives. There's a lot of opportunity, like it was brought up, plan project that, well, we no longer have planned projects, but flexibility, if based on certain parameters met, that is different from dictating those standards. So there is opportunity to do that. And I think it is, it is a little akin to our conversation on downtown premiums. It's finding the balance of a sort of an appropriate base level and an appropriate incentivized level, and trying our best to get that right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have more to say, but this is just proposed business for the future. So I'll save it for when that comes up on an agenda. Thanks.
And just one other, if I could just add one more thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of land use decisions that are within our control. Things about how we are setting up regulations, how we are setting densities, how we're looking at parking. There's a lot of opportunities for us to impact sustainability with what I would say more traditional and appropriate land use regulations than at times delving into building functionality considerations. They're all related, but there's a lot of space towards moving towards those goals.
Like, would it ever be possible to tie low density to certain other things that you would be required to do in order to build at that low density? Or does it always have to be a carrot?
Generally, well, I would say carrots and desires go better together. So when you do it the other way, I think the fundamental problem is there are some restrictions on things we can't dictate. The more we try to use land use decisions to get around that, I'm no attorney. That's when you should listen to Mr. McDonald. But the more questionable it's going to be that you're just trying to get around something that we don't have the power to do. So I would generally say carrots for the things we want have a more logical nexus for us to defend.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Gibrandel.
I'm wondering, before COVID and before actually a lot of the members of this current commission, we would have a once a year kind of a most of the day workshop where we would have more kind of time to discuss some of these types of items and think about priorities. And I'm really missing that. And it's really different on Zoom. And I'm just wondering, like, before, I know these things probably take scheduling way far in advance, but before we completely lose our weather, just wondering if there's any way to do something in some outdoor setting that is covered or something like that that might allow us with some sweaters on in October to be able to just have these conversations that aren't at 11 o'clock at night. And those were productive times, and it felt really good to be able to kind of have more active dialogue with our colleagues. And COVID has put a damper on so many things, but that's one of the things that has put a damper on for sure. And I don't even know how many of us have really participated in that in terms of the last time that actually happened. So I guess I would just encourage. I would love to see that happen again. And I think that there's some kind of pent up demand that I'm feeling about the ability to just sort of talk freely with each other about things that the discussion can evolve. It doesn't just have to be like on, topic 1A or topic 5B or, whatever it is, to be able to allow some of these things to just have a little bit of a life of their own so that we can see where they go. So I would just like to put in a plug for that.
I would add, in the past, it hasn't been with council, but it could be.
Yeah, though we got a lot, I think, I only attended one with council joint session. It was televised, it was very formal and everything.
Yeah.
Whereas the one that we had, members of the public could come, not a lot came, but members of the public could come, but we just had the ability to be just more, I don't know, again, letting the discussion evolve as it went. And sometimes we'd sort of stumble onto different things that we may not have had we not had that kind of more open format. So.
Agreed. It was a workshop. There were sticky notes and speed dating on one of them. And it was lovely. It was great.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dish.
I just wanted to second that. and in an entirely self-interested way say that I feel like we are sort of unleashing that a little bit in these meetings, and it's awkward. It's awkward because it makes them go late, which this is selfish, but this is late. I was up late last night. It's hard for me. And these kinds of discussions need patience and not because, and they need not to be framed by something that's before us by a petitioner. And so I would love to see us find a way to do this. Yeah. But not at 10 or
10:15, 10:16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done worse.
Anything else? We've covered a lot. So let's move on to 14, which is adjournment. Anyone want to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Weich, seconded by Commissioner Clark. All in favor, put up your hand and wave. Good night. Thanks. Have a good week.